Well, good morning, folks. This is Ron Gallagher at PAMIC. We're just waiting for some of our attendees to catch up. We wanted to make sure you were aware that we are here, we are live. Technology is working, but it was awfully quiet. We'll be kicking this thing off in a minute or two, and it's with great pleasure and an honor that I introduce Erin Selfie from Pennsylvania Lumbermen. She's the chair of our IT committee, has done a fantastic job, put a great set of panelists together, and she's going to be the host for today's session. So with that, Erin, I'm just going to send it over to you, and if you have any opening comments or whatever you want to do, you can kick the whole thing off. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ron. So welcome everybody to the 2020 IT Trends Seminar. We didn't even think a month or two ago that we would still be in a virtual setting, but here we are. I even remember back in March when we originally closed our offices in Philadelphia, I kind of thought this would be a 2 to 4 week situation, and then reality hit, but we are as strong as ever, and we are ready for our first fully virtual IT Trends Seminar. So thanks for attending. As Ron said, I'm Erin Self. I'm the Vice President of Information Technology at Pennsylvania Lumbermen's Mutual Insurance Company. We're headquartered in Philadelphia, and it's my 3rd year chairing this group. I love the committee, I love the organization, and I've met a lot of fantastic people that I've been able to network and bounce ideas off, and learned a lot of things from PAMIC, and that's what it's all about. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I do too. Thanks for joining again. I know it's tough. There's been a lot of seminars, I know this time of year, but we worked really hard, and I think it's going to be a great use of your time today, and I hope you agree. To get started, I wanted to thank our sponsors. They're up here on the screen. Their funding allows us to have these events and our other educational events. So we want to give them a big virtual round of applause and thank you, and hope they stick around for another year of sponsorship. That means a lot to everyone. I also would like to thank our IT committee members. They did a lot of hard work preparing for today. I've got a list of our members right here. We've got Nathaniel Waite from Goodville Mutual Casualty Company, Robin Schroyer from Brethren Mutual, Carol Alec from Mutual Benefit Group, and Jason Breckville, Goodville Mutual, BJ Gardner from Pennsylvania Lumbermen's, Chris Gearhart from Millville Insurance Companies, I knew I'd mess something up, Bruce Battaglia from Harford Mutual, Bob Rittinger from Value Momentum, and Paul Franchek from Quest GTS. So I probably messed up 1 or 2 people's names, despite the fact of running through them many times prior to this session. So if I did butcher your name, I apologize, but appreciate you just as much nonetheless. And finally, I wanted to thank PAMIC, Andrea, Brittany, and Ron for all their help in getting our session together. So a couple of admin notes. The polls will be popping up twice per session. That's for CE purposes. We need to make sure you're there and attending and not distracted with something else to fully earn your CE credits. When you did your registration, you should have been prompted or had a place to enter in your license number. If you did not, email Andrea Strobel at PAMIC. That's ASTROBLE at PAMIC.org. Strobel@PAMIC.org if you need assistance with those credits. And just remember, if you did not put that license number in, you will not get the credits. So it's very important. For the agenda, hopefully you have it handy, but I'll do a quick walkthrough. 8:30 to about 10, we're going to do a modernization and a core systems replacement legacy migration. We have a wonderful panel there today. And then we're going to have a mid-morning break, about 15 minutes from 10 to 10:15. And then we're going to come back and we're doing a been there, done that type of session. some existing, some things that several of our committee members have been involved with. That was meant to be a roundtable, so we were doing the best that we can to try to make it an interactive event. Any questions, we'd really love you to bring those, because the more questions we have and the more interaction, the more we can simulate what the experience would be like if we were together in person in Harrisburg. Lunch break will go from 11:45 to 1, and then after lunch, we've got a session on public cloud, which is a big topic that came up when we were brainstorming. Got a fantastic panel put together for that. Break, and then at the end, please hold out because we've got a wonderful presentation with COVID-19, not just looking back, but best practices moving forward, which is, I think, where a lot of our brains are right now. A very dynamic speaker for that closing session. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started and turn it over to our first session, Modernization, Core Systems Replacement, and Legacy Migration. A couple of cliff notes on that. We haven't seen this topic in a while in our brainstorming sessions, and it is back. So many members, I think, are looking at new technology, and what are we doing with the old stuff is popping back up onto the scene. So lots of interest in that topic. Several people here with us. We've got Nathaniel Waite with over 17 years of experience in the industry. He's currently a systems architect, building new systems and doing strategic visioning for Goodville Mutual. He has previously been on the steering committee for Accord, and he also helped to develop the 2.x API framework and messages with Accord. So Bruce Battaglia oversees the PMO for Harford Mutual. They're based in Harford County, Maryland, property casualty. Bruce is responsible for leading the business analyst, project leads, and the project management responsibilities for all the projects at Harford. They released their first phase of quite an aggressive plan to replace their core systems, the first version of their policy admin system in September, very recent and timely information here. He's been with Harford Mutual since 2017. Born and raised in Baltimore, graduate of Loyola University, and he has a degree in computer science. We've got Sundar Vallinayagam is the CEO of JARUS Technologies, and he's also an enterprise architect and helped several insurers with core systems modernization. JARUS Technologies does an insurance systems framework, which is a microservices approach to core systems replacement. So microservices, definitely a current term in the industry, so we're looking forward to him. Automated underwriting, did self-service and mobile apps, a lot of new stuff there. He's got a bachelor's degree in electronics engineering and a master's in computer science. And finally, we've got Mica Cooper with 30 years of experience building systems for Hotels.com, Kraft, Bass Pro, a lot of big ticket items there. He is the CEO and software architect of, I didn't practice this one. Mica, you'll have to correct me with this if it's AISUS InsureCrypt, which is a SaaS quote bind policy cloud system for the mutual insurance industry. And I should know that because I'm in the mutual insurance industry. So you can see a wonderful panel of talent here. We do have an hour-and-a-half planned for this session. It is a long session, but we wanted to make sure we had enough time. There's a lot of talent here, and we want your questions and answers. So we have plenty of time for that. And if we finish up early, no one will mind an extra few minutes for a coffee break there. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them. If you do have any questions, you can enter them into the Q&A, and I'll be moderating that. And when I see there's a good time for me to butt in, I will do that with the questions. So with that, thank you very much. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Nate, or is it Nate or Bruce kicking off, whichever one of these fine gentlemen are kicking off the modernization topic. Again, thank you, and thanks for listening to me for the last 5 minutes.
All right, thanks, Aaron. So I'll jump in real quick just to kind of talk a little bit about what we're planning on doing this morning and kind of how it's going to work. So thanks, Aaron, for kicking it off. Thanks, Pamek, for hosting this. As the four of us were kind of talking through this a couple of weeks ago, trying to figure out how we're going to present this, each of us started kind of going down a little bit of a presentation, and the other three of us were jumping in, asking a lot of questions, and that went down to other discussions, and it turned into really a great, more of a discussion interview kind of process as opposed to a dry kind of presentation. So that's kind of how we thought we'd approach today. But that involves everybody on the call as well. So we're going to make sure you guys if you have a question, submit it through the chat, submit it up through that process, unmute yourself, raise your hand, ask the questions. We want to make this as interactive as possible. We want your stories too. Some of the questions that we're going to pose out today are going to pose opportunities for you guys to give us some stories that you're experiencing today. We'll talk a little bit about our experiences, the tools and products that we bring from Nate and I, some of the experiences we've had as we're going through this, but it's open for everybody to kind of jump in. Nate, I'll let you kind of give a little spiel as well.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to be here and talk. It's a little intimidating doing it virtually, but just to kind of get started, there are so many different ways to migrate systems. And in fact, even in our own operations, we're migrating the same systems to different other systems within it. You know, we're going from our policy processing systems to our analytics systems to our claim systems. And as we start modernizing, going from our legacy structure, those migrations take a life of their own. You know, we have staffing issues because we have a lot of legacy developers that are attached to certain ways of doing things, and so we have training and that type of thing. And we've got modern technologies such as APIs that some systems use and some systems don't. And so we're just going to kind of go through today a little bit and just kind of explore some of the different types of migration systems that or patterns that we've used. You know, Sundar is working currently with us at our organization, and he's been doing that with a couple other insurance carriers too. So he brings a perspective that we wouldn't have. And Mica's applications inside the cloud, so he's going to bring a different perspective on that as well. So as Bruce said, I just would encourage everyone, we have some finite experiences, but everybody else has different kind of migration, and part of PAMIC is learning from each other. So as we start getting in this and we start asking each other questions, please jump in. We'd love to learn from your experience as well. I know it was fun to discuss what we were doing and what we've learned, even just as we were preparing for this. So we're excited about doing that with the 24 attendees that are here today. So thank you guys for joining, and we're excited to kick this one off. So, so just to kind of get right into the migration message, I think there's a poll question that we have. Is that?
Yeah, we can launch the first poll.
So with this poll, just to introduce it, where are you in your core systems migration strategy? And we're going to share this information back. And let's just kind of see what kind of the feel for the group. But do you want to start a little bit? Let's see, who's talking first? I apologize. So we have a couple of different types of migration. Sundar, did you want to go over those a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Now, as we are kind of working with, yeah, first of all, yeah, thanks for inviting us. This is a great session to be in. This is something that we are focused for more than a decade. The first policy admin system that we developed went live in 2010. It is, we helped a carrier, Farmers Alliance, build their own system. They selected a vendor, but you know their focus was in farm owners, and it was a pretty challenging, you know, set of coverages and and rules and rating steps. So they looked at the different products, but they decided to go build the system. So there are many approaches that are there. In fact, there will be some polling questions. Yeah, maybe the poll finished. So do we have the poll response? Okay. Yeah, the poll shows that 29% of you are thinking of migration in the next few years, and a large majority, 33%, are currently migrating. That's great, and currently migrating all core systems, which is good, and 21% completed. Oh, this is really a very nice situation to be in. So it's a lot of things. 21% complete, 17 looking at all systems, not just the policy admin system, majority looking at policy admin system, and others kicking off. Okay.
So Sundar, I think the folks that have answered that they've already finished all their migrations should be the ones presenting today.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So yeah, feel free to pitch in. You can chat, you can raise your hand, and we can unmute you, and then you can share your story. Yeah, this is really a tough project. It's there are different strategies that different companies do. We have some additional poll questions, whether you do incrementally or you go big bang. We have some carriers who have done both for many different reasons. So it'll be very interesting to get to know how almost 60% of you who have done this, some of the core systems, how you went about doing some of these strategies, both the strategies and tactics to get not only the systems migrated, but the data migrated. That's really where we saw significant challenges, is getting the data, the rules and the rules that are there, what is required, what is not required. 10 years ago is not the same requirement now. So getting the data into the new system creates all sorts of challenges. It's a continuous process. So it'll be interesting to hear your perspective on that.
Sundar,
Yeah.
you raised so when we're talking about migration, risk is always the thing that is the challenge here that we're looking for. You raised an important point with Farmers Alliance, and we actually saw this with Fireman's Fund. So west of the Mississippi, Fireman's Fund used to write a large set of farm owners' business. One of the challenges in migrations is to make sure that you have enough BAs or staff to look at the new product and look at your current set of products and look at your functionality and make sure that your migration, that they have that functionality in place before you migrate. So if they don't, what is your strategy to migrate with development? Because the vendor's obviously going to be developing as you migrate. So one of the things we see is that most vendors have trouble with farm. That's just a significant fact. And so that's always a challenge there. I wanted to point that out because product and functionality is a key piece of the migration and making sure that they match.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So in fact, we have this which says that the requirements are always correct but seldom complete. So as we kind of get into it, you find new things, new ways of doing things. What is apparently clear, it's unclear yet, as you kind of go into it. So there are these situations that really extend the project. Anyway, we'll go into some of these strategies. Yeah, Mica, you want to talk about what you guys do, how you approach some of these? Yeah.
Yeah, so I mentioned the development part because we're actually in our next stage, in our next iteration, which is a true cloud native core. And we are lucky to have a set of customers that are allowing us to build that in tandem with them. And so this is something that I would say there's two approaches here to low risk migration. Low risk migration has been around for a long time. It's something that vendors typically don't talk about. It's something that's become a little bit more up to the front recently. some of these migrations, we recently saw a migration with Guidewire take 7 years for the Harford with the T. You know, and so this can be a risk. We saw another carrier in Des Moines that did a migration and it went badly, and they lost their whole P&C lines to, they had to sell them off to cover the cost. It is a high risk. So low risk, what does that mean? So for us, what that means is we're attacking a module at a time. So policy, billing, and claims. Policy is obviously the basis for all of the insurance. We need account numbers, we need policy numbers. And so we are gradually taking what we have now, writing code, migrating, transforming the data, moving it into the cloud, writing our modules, and then we're coming back and writing audits. We just completed, so our API, we just completed writing, I think it was 1,067 tests for our API. And so as we migrate, and Nathan's going to talk about API, but we are building a cloud API and we're moving the data into the cloud. As that moves, we can kick off tests via just a button on a web page and say, test this data, test this data, test this data. So functionality is added, we can test it. There's also audit. So for us, that means coming back and testing the legacy system, testing premium, coverages, et cetera, and then making sure that that audit matches in the cloud. So that is a development, low-risk migration. That is something that I would not recommend for most people. I just don't think that that is something, if you're needing to move now, that's not something that you would probably attack. I see Bruce nodding. But the other approach is to, once you've, as Sundar mentioned, once you've mapped your data, once you've mapped your capabilities from your legacy system to your future system, there's several approaches you can take within that. You can have 1 team, 2 teams, 3 teams, 1 team attacking policy, 1 team attacking billing, 1 team attacking claims, et cetera, writing the code for the transformation, writing the tests for the transformation to make sure that the audit, very important as you do this process that you are auditing. So one of the things that Sundar and I have talked about is we're seeing this pattern of 1-year migrations. And that's basically, so you started a date and time. We're coming up on January 1. So let's say you have been working on a migration for a period of time. You say, as of January 1, we are going to fork our traffic. So traffic is going to go into the legacy system. It's going to go into the new system. And so you run a month's worth of data, maybe a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. You come back, you run your audits, you check it, correct any items that you find, you run another month's worth of traffic, correct it. You could be doing this daily, whatever. But the idea is that you're checking your traffic and making sure that they're matching up and you don't have any surprises. Then you can go on to billing. Then you can go on to claims. At the end of a year, as you write new business and renew business, that traffic all forks into the new system. So after a year, if everything was perfect, management could essentially say, well, we passed all the audit checks, everything is good. We are now officially on the new system. So in the past, a lot of times the migration was to do an all or nothing migration. And that's a all hands on deck, stressful. Everybody, IT hates this, absolutely hates this. It's just the hardest thing that you can possibly do. And core system migration, I mean, let's be serious. It's been described as boiling the ocean because it is really, really hard to do. I'd rather do a merger and acquisition than to do a core system transformation in most cases. Bruce is smiling again. It is very career risky. It is tough. But low risk migration gives you that comfort to say, yes, it works good. We're not having a cutoff. We're not doing this immediately. We still have the legacy system. We have the new system. And so low risk migration is really coming into play in the systems right now, seeing them come out. Another thing I would mention with the migration. Yes.
We do have a question before you, again, is now a good time?
Yes.
Okay, so this is from Randy Skopacek, who's actually on my team. And if we can unmute him, I'm going to have him unmuted in case there's dialogue would be better. So anyway, his question is, he says, when people say they fully migrated, is that one, you moved your operations and integrations into the new system and decommissioned the legacy systems? Because sometimes when he hears talks about done migrating, you still have legacy system with data pass through, partial churn, historical data that didn't necessarily need to get converted. So
Yeah, I'd probably take that. Yeah, when we say migrate, yeah, migrate and shut off the mainframe. I mean, that's really what we did. It does take a couple more years. It's not instantaneous. You cannot really take it off. For example, when we did the migration at Farmers Alliance, we initially thought that we'll bring 7 years worth of data, but there are so many years worth of data. I mean, we didn't really migrate all those because they said that we'll let the old system running. We can always get back to that system if they wanted to go back in time. Then later on, it was decided that we'll extend that 7 years to 10 years. So we migrated those additional data. And then it became, then the reports. Initially, they were reporting for MIS, hundreds of reports, and all that needed to be kind of moved over. So it does take, it did take, we started on this project at the first line. Again, it was a low risk approach like Mica was talking about. The first line of business went live 2010. And the last line went live, I think 2015, because they were moving one line at a time. And then on renewal, it'll move over to the new system from the old system, every policy. And after that, the mainframe was there for a couple more years. Then they completely shut it off. Once all the downstream systems, the reporting, everything got moved, and they actually shut off the IBM mainframe. So yeah, so it does mean that you shut it off, but it does take a couple more years and more migration of the data before you can say that you no longer need that system. You can confidently shut it off. So Bruce, how is your experience?
And that's one of the challenges that we've got as well, Sundar, is that what we're doing is we're actually converting at renewal. So as a policy comes up for renewal, so we implemented in September, so we're going through now the renewals, and it'll take a year, obviously, for all those to come through the system. And then we're still going to have all the legacy data out there in our legacy application for audit purposes and any kind of endorsement purposes and those sorts of things. So we're going to have to spin up a second project to figure out how to decommission the old system, how to archive that data into a database that's accessible to be able to use for audit, to be able to use for that. And those are things that we haven't addressed up front. Those are things that, we're pushing back to the tech debt.
Too, right?
That's right, retention issues. So we've got all those things back there that we're worrying about. But for the most part, that system that we're converting from is a 25-year-old system. What we've learned is that we actually put in a large policy a couple months ago into our legacy system, and it took 120 man hours to actually process that policy. And for us, it was a large policy. It was just under $1 million premium policy. So for us, it's a big policy, but 120 hours for us to process that. So going in the new system, it's like a 9-minute process. So it's really important for us to not worry about the downstream right now, but we've got to move forward. So we're kind of separating those two things, Sundar. So in sense, it's sort of a hybrid, but sort of a low risk as well. But the risk is going to come in down the road when we try and figure out what to do with that archive data.
Yeah.
Bruce, one of the things I think we touched on in the when we were talking before, and an important point is you touched on endorsements. So endorsements are an important part when you're doing this migration process. So you're renewing live to the new system, and you have endorsements that are on the old system. Can you touch on that for a second?
So it's coming over with whatever the latest endorsed value is. So as it renews in the new system with the current configuration of the application.
Right, but somebody is still on the old system and they want to endorse a coverage in add a car or something on the old system. Now what?
Right. So they can do it one of two ways. So we set up a routine that we could actually do a manual conversion and pull that policy over into the new system and then do the endorsement there. or they could still use the old legacy system and do the endorsement of the legacy system.
Yeah, where we have done is that once it's renewed to the new system, we bring that policy image and all the earlier policy images. So that policy will never be maintained in the old system. So it's always done in the new system.
We didn't bring all that legacy data over with us. It's just the current policy information.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we have one follow-up question too from John Muskell, wondering what size carriers we're talking about, and are these like bigger or smaller mutuals? I think that's more towards what Sundar was saying.
Yep. So Harford Mutual, we're about a $240 million carrier based in 10 states with 8 products, 100% commercial.
Yeah. And all the carriers that we are working
Property and
with
casualty.
sorry. Yeah. So all the carriers that we are working with are regional or super regionals, anywhere from, we are working with a company, Central Insurance, they're 800 million. And Farmers Alliance, our first major policy admin modernization, that's about 180, 200 million. And then, so most of them are in that kind of range, anywhere from 150 million to about $1 billion.
And this one also, so one little prop for the team too, is we did it with about a total IT organization of just over 30 people. And the program was only 20 people to do this migration in 2 years.
Now, Bruce, was everybody on the team working on the migration, all 30 people, or?
No, it's a little less than 20, and that includes some vendor folks as well. We still had to keep our legacy systems up, and also other projects. We're putting in a reinsurance system. We're putting in a new GL system all at the same time too, and we've, like I said, a little less than 30 people. So
yeah, important point there, Nate and Bruce, is how many people are on the team and how many are fully dedicated, and how many does management steal back to do other projects?
Yeah, that's right. And you're talking about one of the topics too is legacy people, right? So you've got people that have been with the company for 35 years that know our data. So we did the data conversion with one person because he knows the data, but he gets pulled into doing reports for the president of the company and the CFO constantly. So how do you manage that with the priorities?
Yeah, and a lot of the things John was bringing up and Mica brought up a little bit is the data quality part of it. Making sure that when you're migrating data and that you're still focusing on that data quality, building those unit tests around it to make sure that it validates. Because even though you're just bringing the new stuff in, you want to make sure that it matches in both systems or in the new system, right?
It's a great.
Did you guys do that, Bruce?
We did. So what we did was we did conversions every single day. During our testing period, as soon as we had a line of business finished, we started doing conversions, and we were able to compare then what the rating was in the old system versus the new system. So we're converting it into our test system, then compare the ratings and the forms and all of that every single day for like 6 months. So that Bruce, gave us the data quality.
So as part of that, as you do that and your team gets familiar with the process and you see errors, you fix the errors, you do more, you fix the errors. Did you see a velocity increase with your team?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The errors went down, and then we were able to move into the next line of business too. And really that helped us to automate the testing. We also used offshore to do automated test scripts for us. Mm-hmm. So we've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of test scripts that run every single night through the conversion process. And that helped us to validate where we were as well. And I don't know about you guys, but from a small mutual, that's a really big leap in culture and mentality to be able to do something like that, because there's the fear of that. Oh my gosh, what if we change the application, then all of our scripts are invalid? Well, that's not really true. So it's getting through that cultural change.
It's a great resource for using offshore disconnected people to build out your unit testing, because they don't have like a invested interest, and they can come usually with just kind of get that done and build up a very large test environment pretty quickly.
Yeah, one of the things that we learned pretty quickly about, Aaron, just real quickly about that, was that we had them doing a lot of sprint testing as well, and that really wasn't as helpful for us. But pushing them more to the automation, super valuable. Sorry, Aaron.
We've got some great questions coming through. Michael, hold your spot there in your notes. From Lydia Stephen. what are your migration thoughts when your older system is a licensed product and it's got to be shut down after a specific date to eliminate dual licensing? One of the other panelists said negotiate a perpetual license. Any other thoughts?
Yeah,
Yes, I think that's a great thing to launch the second poll. I know that Harford and Goodville, they are going in slightly different approaches. Yeah, please, Bruce, Nathaniel, you can take that question. Maybe we can launch the next poll.
Well, our system is not hitting that because we have a policy system that we've built over the past 60 years. You know, plus, actually, there's probably some people that would say that it came from a punch card system. So we don't have the licensing issue, but you do need to consider that of who owns the data and how you're going to actually, you know, like when do you have to shut that off, and whether you choose this low risk migration, we need access to historical data for insurance. So if you're in that case and you need to do it, the low risk migration is probably not the pattern for you. I think the next one was more of a cutover migration, and so that kind of goes into what we're talking about is where you're actually backfilling all the historical information that you need. And one thing that you have to do with that is you need to get legal involved and decide how much historical information that you do need. So you need to engage those other departments. You need to look at your analytics department. So data migration is not just an IT thing. I don't know if anybody else agrees with me or not, but you really need to bring the whole level of the business into migrating a cutover situation. So, so the next poll is if you're migrating, are you developing in a house? Are you implementing a third-party solution or moving to a SaaS solution? So we'll just go ahead and.
While you're answering that, I wanted to touch on that, Nate. So I had a question for Nate a while back. We ran into this situation. Some states require federal reporting of dog bites on minors. So you have a 3-year-old that gets a dog bite, that has to be reported. And now you have a tail that can go literally until they're 18. So that is a 15-year tail that you must be able to maintain that claim. You can't officially close it. You can pseudo close it. So as a vendor, I'm like, how do we deal with this? 15-year tail on a claim like this. Some product liability and different things like that have a tail, but that makes an impact in how you deal with that. So people don't think about dog bite, but you go back to the licensing question. It's like, wait a minute, I don't want to maintain a license for 15 years on a system I've decommissioned.
Right.
Yeah, and so it's about getting that data into the right spot and for long-term storage. So, is your new system that long-term storage spot? Sometimes your analytic tools or your data lakes and your data warehouses can be that long-term storage tool, but those all require migration as well. So.
Nate, Dan has in the Q&A, I'll just throw some commentary on that. That was his comment. He converted active policies upon renewal into the system and then centralize the data warehouse, update monthly with the data from both of the systems, and then you can have that single version of the truth. But legacy apps still remain running for reference as needed. I think this is probably a good long topic in itself that we're all experiencing, right? With that leftover. Any other comments on that?
As part of my one question that I was kind of wanting to ask a little bit, how many people have done a low risk migration or a cutover migration within their systems? I don't know if we have a show of hands.
Yeah, we have a poll on that.
Actually,
poll 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, then I'll wait till our fourth poll. See, I'm pulling ahead. So
yeah.
So yeah.
We have 2 more questions. Do we want to comment on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think I can take. I think one carrier went with the the low risk of migrating on renewal. Another customer did the big bang, moved all policy. So they were kind of, this is Aon Affinity. They wanted to move Group Life, Group LTD, and they have one more product, Group Life Elite, into the new one. So they did the big bang approach. I mean, that was high risk, at least in my opinion, but for whatever different reasons, they decided to go down that path. It was a testing nightmare, but we were able to successfully complete that. There were issues with respect to the processing things in the new system, because when you are doing big bang, the quality, whatever you test, still something kind of gets through. So it is a challenge, but it has been done, and it has worked successfully. So it's really, how they want to reduce the confusion. They were also having another project, a Salesforce project for, they called it customer experience CX project. So many projects got along with that. So they didn't really want to build multiple bridges to the new as well as the old system. So that's the reason why they decided to go big bang, because they could build all their newer integrations with the new system. So it did work well, but it did have a higher risk and much more testing. So we had to do the rigorous testing, although we originally thought that that's going to be like a 2.5 year project. It did take 3 years because of that additional testing that were required for the big bang. On renewal is a little bit lower risk, but it does cause confusion to the agents, because at some point in time, they don't know exactly whether they are in the new system or the old system. And there is some logic, additional logic that's built in their portal. So depending on the policy that they select, they may end up going to the old or the new. So it does cause some confusion. Another customer did, it's doing something very interesting. They are moving by book of business, so that an agent is not confused about whether they are in the old system or the new system. But yeah, big bang has been tried and has been successful, but it does require a lot more eyes on the data than the incremental migration, where you are migrating like a few hundred policies a day.
Aaron, you said you had a couple other extra questions.
I do, yeah, and that one, so you just answered the third question down I have here from John Moskal. I just let me know, just send another Q&A if that didn't answer your question. We have another one here from Randy Skobasek about the business support. For those of you that have gone through this, how the business support has gone for getting data. Sometimes after we go through these conversions, he says IT can't get you that report anymore, right? It is in a different format, or it's off on retention and purged. So they kind of think that you can always get the data despite retention and the conversion being behind you. So just curious with the group, what types of experiences you've had there.
Just from my perspective, real quick, just from my perspective a little bit, I think it's really important to involve the business right up front. Just like we were talking with low risk migration, when you're bringing your BAs together and you're talking about what your data is looking like, and even if you're just doing new policies of having, trying to come up with the what you're actually going to convert, it's really important to do that. And the other part is, if you don't have a data warehouse, you should get one. So, as far as, because what you want is you want the business to actually ask their own questions and build their own reports off the data that you're doing, no matter which policy system it is. If you're building your reports right out of your policy system, that's great, but you need a self-service type of thing. So I think if you're not doing that, you probably should think about doing some of that. And there's, that probably is a whole different topic in itself. Mica, do you had some points on that?
Yeah, part of the risk factor with these migrations is bringing that team together and making sure you have the right people to make this happen. So if you want to feel better about the migration, you know, be confident that you've hired the right people. So when we look at it, you know, the person that's heading up the project, have they done a core migration before? If they've never done it before, that's a risk factor. So we have somebody who's a business architect, PMP certified, who's done probably 5 or 6 major migrations for tier 1 carriers. And so when they come into the mix, they already know the questions to ask. They can manage a couple of project managers and a BA staff. And those people can really map this thing out in its entirety and its detail. One of the things that we saw with a tier 1 carrier recently with an implementation was they spent that 7 years that I mentioned before. They got all the way down to the wire and they're ready to turn it live. So they were doing a cutoff on a line of business. And so all at once. And they didn't have their AL3 migration, AL3 mappings done to their data to go into Ivan so the agents could do their download. And so now here's a senior VP that Nate and I know who goes and locks himself. He goes and gets clothes and everything and sequesters himself at the office for 30 days while he does the migration AL3 mapping, because nobody on staff, they hadn't mapped that capability into their migration. And so it's very important to have these people. If you don't have somebody who's done this before, I suggest you get somebody who's done it before. If you are trusting the vendor, I would suggest that you get someone on your side who can watch the vendor, who can be your advocate and work on that and make sure that those things are done for you. So it's always great to have a vendor that you trust. I'm a vendor, but I love to see a carrier that brings somebody to the table who knows what they're doing and knows the right questions to ask, and that lessens the risk for both of us.
Did that answer the question a little bit? Or did anybody else have any? Aaron, is there another one?
Yeah, Bruce, your thoughts? How did you approach those report stuff?
Well, so for us, it's the challenge is that like I said, we converted our first 4 lines and we're ready to move on to the next 4 lines. But then the business is like, oh, that's great. But what else can you do in the 4 lines you converted? We've got a lot more enhancements that we want to do. Like I said, we've got a small team. So how do you manage the business and say, well, we can do all those things, but then we're not going to get your other 4 lines as quickly as you wanted us to. So it's a matter of prioritization. It's really tough road. And it goes back to Nate's point of sometimes you just have to say, you guys make the call. I can do that and get that data for you, or I can move on. You guys have to make that call. So you've got to have that relationship with your business.
So the business architect and good PMPs using software, project management software, can absolutely show, here is where we are with our project. This is what it's required to meet these milestones. And if you want these feature enhancements, here is how far the milestones will slip. So typically, management basically thinks, oh, well, we can just work a few extra hours and get these things done. But if you have the people in place, they can show you concretely, you know, once you attain the velocity like Bruce has, you can show that these tasks are being estimated properly, and you can show where these milestones will be if management wants that. And then you can make an intelligent decision on where you want to place your time and how far you want to get.
And to Micah's point on that, you know, it was our case years ago where you just took the smartest people in the company that have never done it before, but because they're the smartest people in the company, have been there for a long time, you assume that they could run a huge core system replacement too. And it just didn't work.
I have one question, but it's a pretty good question, all encompassing. So I'm going to hold it to a little bit further, sort of a reflection back. So I want to hear some more conversation.
No, that's okay. So right now we've talked about low risk migration, where we're bringing only the new business into the new model. But one of the things with low risk migration is you need to make sure that you own or have the ability to keep and store the data that you're not migrating, all that other stuff. So the other part that we've just generally touched base with is this cutover migration, where we're gonna, you know, start cutting everything over, you know, like migrate everything and then flip a switch and turn the system. And there's some risks with that because, you know, you have this, this day zero, and then all of a sudden you don't have these reports, or you didn't think about doing an AL3 migration. And so there's a lot of project planning and that type involved in it. And so the next kind of thing, and we were brainstorming, we were coming up with all these different migration, and you probably have a different experience. There's I want to call it a hybrid or an API type migration. And so this is one of the ways that we are currently doing migration within our system. And just as full disclosure, Sundar from JARUS is helping us out with this and just being a great partner with that. But what we are doing is we're building an API around our legacy systems that go into the new model. And so we've defined this new data in motion model that can be used and consumed by the new system to populate transactions and to articulate the concepts of policy and the insurables and the different things within that. And so by doing this and building that API around the new model, we are almost doing the migration is happening in real time with the different pieces. So as you start plugging new systems in, so we have chosen DXC to do a new claim system, and they need to integrate with our policy system, and we are working at. So what we do is we give them the access to the API that's tied around the new model, and it's like they are actually querying from the new model. So you can actually then cut over and move to the new system a lot earlier with your system, and it reduces the level of risk that you're running into because it doesn't matter whether it's the old system or a different carrier. In fact, with ours, our goal is to actually simplify we have 2 or 3 different carrier systems that we are merging into this one API that expresses the policy in the same model. So we're doing that migration within the API. I don't know, Mica, what do you feel about that?
I really like it. We're seeing a lot more, across all industry verticals, we're seeing this as a strategy to basically, as these projects drag out, the software costs rise. This is a way to give legacy systems new life and extend them until you're ready to safely migrate to another system. I like the fact that it gives you the ability to migrate in a very granular way. So you can have an API, and one call can go to the legacy system, one call can go to the new system. You can pull data from the legacy system, you can transform it in the API and regurgitate it out via the API. And the consumer of the API has no idea, like Nate says, they have no idea. So it's this idea of granularity. You can build in your tests. I also like the fact that one of the things that we do and many companies are doing is, of course, they're versioning their APIs. So when you version the API, you can have a version of the API that's hitting the legacy system. That's your 1.0. Now that you've wrapped it, we would typically call these a wrapper around the legacy system. And then you have the API for the new system. And so you can have API like get policy 1.0 and get policy 2.0. And 2.0 hits the new system. And so you can start in building these reports, getting the data, migrating the data behind the scenes, comparing the data between 1.0 and 2.0, making sure that they're good. This is something that we're seeing across verticals. Again, it's a really good way to just more safely migrate if you have that IT staff.
Yeah, and I just want to bring a couple of points out with that. It's not like a quick button. We're doing a lot of work behind the scenes when we're doing it. And our existing policy system is not a multi-company system; it's a singular system. So, in our new model supports this multi-company kind of facet. And the other thing is we're doing some, coverage code modernization and the thing moving into concepts that our existing model doesn't store, for example, risk items or insurables, or some people call them units. And so we're doing this transformation in the model to make it go into the new format so that our new systems can plug into it sooner and start reading it. And then when we make the switch over to the next system, we can do it, thoughtfully and provide the same level of service to the new system. So the part is, we have a lot of systems that are touching what we're migrating to. And that's the thing about wanting to do a cutover. You want to move everything over, cut over, and then start using it. But it's really hard to cut over your whole organization at the exact same time. So this approach allows you to cut over and move the pieces one at a time, or a little bit more thoughtfully, especially of a small team. If you don't have the staff to handle everything all at once, it works real well.
So
Yeah, we did have a comment in there from Dan Borges. When considering analytics, he's saying all that rich legacy data is just so important then to retain for your, when you're looking at your long-term profitability. So great comment.
Nate, one important point that when we sat down with Nate a while back, when you're looking at APIs, typically you have your systems as policy, billing and claims, data warehouse, et cetera. You have these different systems. Programmers over time have typically called into the systems directly. With an API that sits on top of the system, you really want to cut out the cross communication between modules, because we call that spaghetti code, and it makes it very difficult to do these cutovers. So once you move to an API, the idea is that all the communication goes through the API, and you stop this cross communication under the covers, and that helps, if from a technical standpoint, that makes your migration more successful. And it means that if you, for instance, if all your data comes from your new policy API, you can cut that policy API over easier to a new system or another vendor, or make changes to it. It becomes very easy to do it. But when you have the cross communication under the covers between these policy, billing, and claims, it makes it difficult to do that. That's when things break.
Yeah, I think one of the things that at least we are kind of, as we are moving into the microservices world, API world, one thing that we are seeing is that, yes, there is a technical advantage, but there is also an organizational advantage. Is that this brings in a product approach instead of a project approach. I think that approach, organizationally, it kind of has lots of advantages. That's really what we are seeing, is that so you have an API team that owns that particular stuff, whether it goes to the old or the new, they take care of it. And the model becomes uniform. So you don't end up having a personal lines model, commercial lines model. So the product takes care of that. The model becomes uniform. For example, in Goodville, as Nathaniel mentioned, we are working on some of those APIs. So the multi-company, multi-line model becomes a line neutral model. And we have an API to get, save those policies, transactions, being able to do some of those things. So that really brings in a lot of value, because like Mica mentioned about the versioning. So it really becomes a product for you. And that product and the model, the line neutrality of that really helps different business units to take advantage and build on top of those things very quickly and get to that migration.
I think when we're doing these data transformation, that data in motion model is so important. And having something that can articulate any line of business. We often, Accord started out with a very complex model. I don't know if everybody's familiar with, you're getting, you got a different transaction for personal auto, and you got a different transaction for home, and so you have all these different mappings. But if you create a model that is unified, you have the same mapping no matter if it's home to get the location and dwelling of a home that you do in a BOP product to get the dwelling and location of the business. And so you're then just dealing with product differences on coverages. And so your mappings become so much easier. The concepts of transactions, the concepts of products, and I think that is key. So I would really encourage I'm a big believer in the data in motion models, organizations having having one that they adopt and try to spread throughout all their systems that they're doing as they're passing information around. I think that's key to streamlining and reducing the amount of time and effort that we spend doing all this data mapping that we do in insurance. We're mapping the same things over and over and over again, from billing to claims to policy to data warehouse. And we create a consistent model we can send around all those. We can really increase the speed to do applications in the future.
Yeah, maybe time to do our the poll 4 migration approach. We talked about cutting over low risk, so maybe we can. Yeah.
So while that poll's going on, I wanted to make an additional point on we're not advocating for low risk or cutoff. We're just trying to present, typically carriers have been presented with just the cutoff strategy. And so we wanted to highlight this low risk as something that is an alternative and give you some information about it. Whether you go with low risk or a hybrid or whatever, or cutoff, there are two important pieces, and that is that you engage all the stakeholders and map all of your risk. And one of the things that I have seen from a security standpoint is that information security is one of the last pieces to be engaged. So companies will do this cutover, they'll plan the project, and then they say, okay, it's live, now go add the security. And so there's this time lag from the time that a system goes live with your API or your new modules or whatever, until somebody, so whether that's an outside vendor that comes in and instruments it, so it could be Tech Canary, Threat Connect, Logarithm, whoever you use for your security vendor or internal, there is a time lag between the time that you put the system out there and the time that you instrument it and starting collecting your threat data on these systems. These stakeholders should be involved in the process from the get-go. So collecting this data should be part of your process. So when you're doing audit on policy, you should be doing audit on security as well. So I wanted to make that point, and let's hit the poll.
Wow, okay. Okay. That's very interesting.
So no one went with cutover.
Yeah, 0%, yeah. So almost 50% low risk, and then, yeah.
It's definitely as a vendor, I will ask Sundar, but that's definitely the one I would prefer because it gives me less of a heart attack, and I've already had one and I don't want another one. How about you, Sundar?
Yeah, same. Yeah, so that's good. So everybody.
I think it also depends too on your system too. So the policy, whether it's claims or policy admin or billing, because claims might be more suited to a direct cutover where your policy admin. So I think you might also see a blend. But we tend to think about policy, right? Because that's the most.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That's an important. That's an important point, Aaron, is that when you do a strategy, it's not an all one strategy or all the other. When you look at policy building, claims, et cetera, you can do low risk migration on, say, policy, and then do a cutover on claims. That's a very important point.
Yeah, and claims is that part where I talked about bringing in your leadership and legal and that type of stuff, because you need to know if you're doing a cutover type of thing, which you often have to do because you need to keep policies around for a while in order to, or claims around, depending on the type of claim, you need to set some type of policy up within your organization of your data retention on those and how long you're going to keep them where you have to. So sometimes you're not bringing everything over. You're not doing it for reporting reasons. You're doing it for other types of reasons. So it's important to kind of consider that when you bring which system. It's interesting. We are doing currently a claims cutover right now, and the claims systems have a policy system inside of them because they collect that image of the policy and store it. So it's really interesting. How many times you're migrating the same data, around from system to system.
Yeah,
So I
but
think,
one interesting question, Nathaniel, is that so when you are going to that new claim system, will you move your current claims data into the new system, or you leave it there, process only the new claims in the new system?
No, we're actually migrating the business to find that year, how many years worth of data that for different types of scenario of claims that we need to move into the new system. So obviously all open claims. Because the user interface, the users want to use that the new portal. They don't want to have to continue to use both systems. However, the old system will still be there for historical if we need to go and pull from the old system, like on an ad hoc basis of claims we did not migrate over. So we actually own the system in the warehouse for that claims tool. So if we need to go back and pull a archival claim, we can use it more of an archive situation. So that's our unique thing. The business defined that ahead of time. So, but they're doing a full cutover for 2 different organizations right now.
so we had a couple of things that we had listed out to talk about, and I want to hit one of them real quick and see if there's any questions. And that was time to quote. In core system modernization, one of the challenges that we have is to provide a better experience for our customers. So there's a saying, the Apple experience is the last best experience a customer has, and is the one that they expect their next interaction to have. So people are used to using their iPhone and just pushing a button and making something happen. So the question is, can your company provide the Apple experience? So that is a stressor, because executives are getting asked this question now in CEO roundtables and discussions. And here is some good news. We as an industry do not have to do that. There was recently a top 12 digital customer experience provider survey done by one of the major consulting firms. And we saw several companies in there, including Allstate, which is a top 12, and they are not performing well. So you can provide the best experience, and if you don't make money, it doesn't really matter. So what we see is the best way is to provide customer service, is to make sure that what the agents, the insurers are getting good customer service. So the question becomes, how do we provide that in core system modernization? And one of the things to look for is to be able to pull data. Data is very important to, I think it was Randy's point, is very important. So KPIs. So things that you should be able to look for and get immediately is like days to issue a policy. So this is one of the key things in time to quote. So we see commercial, and I'm sitting on some industry panels now, like with Nate. We also work with standards, and we're doing that now. And we're seeing agents complain about 30-day time to issue a commercial policy. So tracking days to issue a policy, you can track that by line of business, by underwriter, by premium, by agency, and making sure that you establish what we call QoS, service levels, quality of service. So in giving that to management every month and identifying, hey, this is where we're at. We're hitting 20 days. We want to hit 18 days. We want to hit 16 days, and finding things in the system to reduce that time. So in core system modernization, hopefully, you are looking for things that will allow you to reduce those QoS times. Also days to complete a claim. That's also another way to reduce that or make that quality of service better. So the reality is today, agents are really busy. So we see CSRs and producers doing quotes. They're answering the phone. They're taking payments. Well, not so many people are walking in, but they're getting lots of phone calls during the COVID. And so they're very busy. So the reality is price is not the ultimate driver. Customer service is a really big driver. So QoS becomes important in core system modernization. How can we do that? If you can provide a good quality of service level. So if they know, hey, I can get this commercial quote, it's a simple quote, I can get it bound through my system, and I can do it today versus taking 20 days or 30 days with another carrier. It doesn't matter what the premium is in many cases. That is where the CSR is going to take it. So that was one of the pieces that we had talked about looking at. So core system modernization should be able to provide these KPIs to help you drive that competition. So your competition, by the way, is the direct to quote. So we're seeing all of these ads out there like Pi Insurance, and I had it written down here somewhere. Pi Insurance's logo is getting workers' comp is as easy as pie. We know lemonade.com, Geico save 15% in 15 minutes. So these are coming after your business. So customer service can allow you to provide that in a way that the agents are able to make their customers happy.
So yeah, we see three trends in that area, right? I mean, as we are working with different customers, we are doing some things. Pre-fill is becoming very important. So the pre-fill really cuts down the producer's time to enter the information to get the code going. So pre-fill, I see that we are doing more and more pre-fill where we are working with different carriers. And then the 24/7 is becoming an important stuff. Okay? Whether it is improving your data centers or going to the cloud, that's really becoming more important to get that 24/7 going. And the third one is the automated underwriting. Like you were talking about 30 days to get the code, getting the commercial lines automated underwriting through what rules. Obviously there are some complex things that are there. But where we are kind of doing is that, can you move up the automation 60, 70%? Can the producer or the, if it is, the insured direct writer, are they able to get their quote and bind and issue the policy in a single session? Whether can you do that 60% of the time, 70% of the time? We see that those things are kind of moving up. And also endorsements. Okay, if some changes are happening, can that be done with touchless? Can you do the endorsements without underwriters having to review that? So we see a lot of movements in those areas that will definitely improve that ease of use.
It's interesting, Mica and Sundar, that you bring those up because that's the reason why we're doing this, data migration. Our existing systems are not meeting those needs of the business to be able to handle, that time to quote issue and to get to the underwriting rules for us to automate our underwriting quicker and do that pre-fill from those different vendors that we need to. There's so many different more resources that we're pulling in. And it seems like those are different from data migration, but they are very key into how you're actually migrating your data, where you're pulling it in from, because as you start to wrap APIs around things, or as you buy systems that have APIs around it, and you start going through deciding how you're going to store that data, you get all this extra data that you need to actually store, and your legacy system is just one of it. So when we're doing data migration, we need to think about those other data sets that we need to bring in to meet the business needs that they're demanding of us now, because they're starting to, when we're doing the data migration, the business is still going on, and they're telling us to do pre-fill, and they're telling us to speed up the underwriting rules and collect more data and more information that our current systems aren't able to store and complete. And so we need to, when we're migrating it, we've got all this extra data that we need to bring into these systems as well. So it's interesting that you guys bring that up.
Yeah, so classification, it's important that we classify the systems that are being sold by vendors now. So a vendor system that is being sold without an API that is currently being sold, that is a modern legacy system. So that is the term that we call these systems. There are several of these that are still being sold that don't have APIs. We really look to be able to move forward and do these things like with pre-fill. We look for systems that have APIs. So one of the key points of core modernization is the fact that every piece of data that you store should be available via API. Every single piece of data, because you never know what you're going to need access to, who's going to need access to it. So you should be able to get and put every piece of data via an API. That means that in the future, you can move forward and you can bolt things on, you can get anything out, you can get any report that you want. You don't want data hidden in the core somewhere where you can't get it out. So
yep. So we've got 15 minutes left, and we just enter into a more general Q&A. Aaron, do you want to facilitate that a little bit? You have some.
Yeah, I have two questions here. The first one I think is timely, is a trade-off for implementation, assuming that you have some technical debt still kind of hanging out there after you finish that core migration. He's asking, this is Randy, what strategies worked to ensure the business provided the support to address the post-implementation debt? You know, those final pieces of, you know, archiving, you know, all that leftover stuff before we move on to the next big thing, because that's usually it. Okay, get this migration out of the way so then we can get on with X, Y, and Z. And actually, I might call on you from PMO, Bruce. That might be a good question, you know, because you've got a lot of cleanup to do after you're done.
From my perspective, we are terrible at it. We just have not been able to prioritize that with the business to set aside the right capacity to do that. You know, it's always the thing, you can't tell the business you're setting aside capacity for tech debt because they'll never allow you to. So you've got to figure out how to hide that from the business, basically. And we at Harford have not been successful at that yet. So if anybody's got some tips and tricks, I'd be glad to hear that one.
So the thing that we have always advised is a business architect, somebody who's got that experience, who's done these migrations, who can explain that in a meaningful way and show in project, you know, this is the timeline, this is where you're at, this is how much debt you're incurring, and be able to quantify that to management in a way that allows them to make those decisions. We see, I think one of the biggest risk factors in these migrations is not hiring a business architect to oversee this process.
And to be candid, it becomes a cost benefit analysis too, right? It doesn't always make sense from a cost perspective to deal with the tech debt right now. The further you kick it down the road, the more expensive it becomes. But so that's the benefit analysis you have to decide when to address that.
You know, Bruce, if I just can comment a little bit about that, I think it's changing the culture a little bit and communicating. I often bring the browser example up with Google. We used to think with Google about which version of browser that we were using, you know, IE 8, IE 9, IE 11. Please don't use any IE anymore. But all these versions, we got stuck on version, and the modern way to go with it is to always be modernizing and always be thinking that there's tech debt involved in your process. We have this modernization agenda, and we keep having to go back to our leadership and say, modernization is never done. I mean, like, we have a modernization plan for now, but our modernization plan is continual. And we're doing that with, like, Google, for example, with their Angular thing. They've kind of said that they're coming out with a new version of Angular every 6 months. And we kind of start to need to help the business realize that, and this is difficult for us in insurance because once we're used to set it and forget it, but then we'll end up with legacy systems that we actually have to convert off of or from over years and that type of thing. So I think it's important to switch that conversation to where it's a never legacy kind of discussion, and that you're building that into your production support, and you're building that into, you know, it's part of your process. So it is hard, and you have to keep having that conversation over and over and over again with the business. And again, if you bring the business along with you and keep talking about it, I think they do understand eventually. But like Mica said, a business architect can really help that discussion a lot. If you're not, then you and IT really have to try to be that business architect, and that's a really tough place for IT to be.
And let me make a point. You do not have to hire a business architect. There are lots of firms out there with people who have lots of experience doing these conversions that you can bring in. So we're seeing fractional services. So that's where you bring somebody in. So for, say, 10 hours a week or 5 hours a week. And those services are available from many firms now.
Yeah, I think what we see is, for example, like in talk about Farmers Alliance, we finished the project 2010, and then these changes keep coming from the business. But then there are technical debt that's there. When we finished it with Java 5, now to Java 9, 10, whatever, so things keep changing. So there is really, like Bruce said, there is really no, the business does not really like to set aside time or effort for the technical debt. It just kind of rolled in. That's where agile technology, the agile methodology comes into play. So you keep doing that on the side, as some of these things come. Some of the things definitely with respect to security, you can tolerate some of these version changes for some time. After that, security becomes a key to keep upgrading those versions. So they get incorporated as part of another business delivery. But chunking this, I think one of our customers uses this pickle jar approach. So you have these golf balls that you kind of put, that's what the business wants. But then you are able to stack in some little pebbles here and there. So you get rid of those debts slowly by some of those agile approaches.
So it sounds like it's dealt with communication, just constantly communicating with the business, letting them know that your needs and why you need to do them. They don't get a choice on those things. They just need to be communicated with that and said that in order to keep the business, the application functional. And just a note, we have some of the mainstream vendors like Duck Creek moving to no versioning either, all cloud-based, and you don't actually control the version as much. I believe that's the way that they're starting to move to that. So we're starting to see it in our insurance space.
So we have a poll question on that cloud stuff. Now that we're talking about cloud, maybe you can launch that poll question. Yeah.
Oh, migrating into the cloud.
Yeah.
Well, Aaron, is there any other questions that anybody else have?
A couple minutes left.
I do. I have one just as looking back at these core systems migrations, and even now we're looking back 15 years and we're like, oh, this stuff is turning into legacy now. How, if there's any carriers that are post-implementation, there's vendor churn, right? Things change in the systems. We're talking about the changes in the technology and the content. Is any reflections back on any of those challenges kind of post-implementation? So it says, let me just rephrase the question. Since core migrations are such a major deal, which you don't want to continually repeat, how do the IT carriers feel years after the implementation, especially as vendor choices and you have business churn? Still happy? I guess one question is, how do we continue to track success with all these changes that happen?
Bruce, you might, just going through a little bit of changing vendors. Do you have any insights or lessons learned that we could learn from?
So I guess it's not as much future and what we did 15 years ago. It's really kind of as we're migrating through, and one of the key for the system migration is picking the right vendor for your organization. Is it the big guys, the Guidewires, the Duck Creeks, or is it a smaller type vendor for your organization? And then, as Sundar mentioned, is it the on-prem? Is it the hybrid approach, or is it a full cloud SaaS solution? So what's right for your organization? And also understand, to Aaron's point, that's going to change in 5 years, the way the market's going, the way the industry's going. With the acquisitions, the vendor you get in bed with today is going to get acquired by the vendor you didn't want to get in bed with. So you've got to deal with that as you roll with it and figure out how to work with that as they either enhance or don't enhance the product that you went with. So we've struggled with that on both ends of that through just the 4 years that I've been with Harford Mutual, and gone through it twice already. So it's something we all have to deal with, and it's going to get worse and worse given the industry and the way folks are going to be collapsing and get acquired. So it's something pretty big.
Absolutely. And we do have one last question I think we can slide in here from John Moskell with Water Street. He says, we have a one-to-one BA to customer relationship on the build. We also migrate to cloud since we're a true cloud platform, and this guarantees a successful migration on time and on budget. If we don't meet our commitment, those dollars are on us, and they also have about 20 years of experience. So,
you know, cloud is not something that we can ignore in insurance anymore. I think that it is something that as our agents, if you're an independent agent provider like we are, their systems are going cloud-based. And there's a lot of new opportunities for us out there to make our independent agents feel like direct writers. And that requires us to have APIs and systems that connect directly to these management systems. There's opportunities for us to be the data source for some of these transactions. So I think over this next couple of years that we're doing, making sure that our systems that we're migrating into support cloud, or at least being able to expose our data and information to a wider group of systems. It's not going to be just our claim systems that's querying our policy system or a billing system. It's going to be the agency management systems and that kind of thing, and more little bit finer granular transactions. We're going to be, if you're doing a vehicle lookup or a change or something, there's opportunities for us as carriers to be the source of truth for that. And so it's really important to take cloud into that consideration. And just a plug for data in motion models, it's really important for us to adopt standards around that, so that when we communicate these systems, we don't have so much transformation and migration in that.
good.
So at this
So I think we had that last poll. Let's just pop those results up really quick, and then we've got to close.
Okay. Wow, this is very interesting.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is a good lead-in for this afternoon. We have a big presentation on cloud, so I think given what we're talking about this morning, that's very timely. You know, when we were kicking off this session and kind of huddling ahead of time, we're like, wow, we've got an hour and a half set up for this session, and you know, you never know where it's going to go. And here we are. We had so much great content from the expert panelists. Great audience participation, so we're excited about that. And with that, you know, if we have any further questions, we'll have them in the you know, recording, or we'll follow up here. We've got them saved, so we'll try to do a follow up with those. So I wanted to thank all of the panelists here for this engaging conversation. We are going to go ahead and take a 15-minute break. We're going to resume at 10:15. We've got the been there, done that roundtables. So they're going to be 20-minute sprints through various different topics. So hopefully you can grab a cup of coffee or something and keep the energy level going, because it's fantastic. So that's it. We'll see you in 15.
Westmont Associates is an insurance consulting firm. If it involves insurance, Westmont can handle it.
We have the ability to understand what our clients want to do, take their innovative and creative ideas and turn them into something that a state regulator can understand and work with.
We have global clients, we have local clients, but we strive to make each client feel like they're our only client.
Okay, I think we're ready to go here for the next segment of our day. This session we are calling Been There, Done That, and we're going to talk about some current topics, a lot of things that many of us, projects and initiatives that many of us may be facing in our organizations, or will be doing that soon. And we'll also get into some, with artificial intelligence, it hasn't been a ton of implementations, but we've also got some really good advice in that space from some current research. So the order we're going to go today is we're going to do mobile app development first with Chris Gearhart. Then we're going to go into disaster recovery as a service. And we've got Pennsylvania Lumbermen's BJ Gardner and Dave Ziegenfuss. Then third, we'll be implementing Office 365 with SharePoint with Nick Thoman from Brethren Mutual Insurance. And then finally, artificial intelligence with Bala Kumar from JARUS Technologies. So the purpose of these sessions, again, are quick. They're going to be about 20 minutes long. Each presenter or facilitator will get us kicked off with some of their experiences to share with you. And again, it's an open dialogue then to learn from one another from these experiences. So I'll go ahead and get started with mobile app development. That will be Chris from Millville Mutual. And Chris, you can give yourself a quick introduction to the group, and then we'll get right into mobile app development. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot for the audience. Same thing with questions. You can go ahead and put a question in through the Q&A. If it's something you really feel like you want to speak about live, don't be shy, just raise your hand, and we will then unmute you and allow you to ask some live questions. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Gearhart from Melville Insurance Companies. I am the Director of IT at Melville. I've been there for more than 5 years now, and I was new to the insurance industry before I started there, so it's been a fun 5+ years. Melville is I guess you'd say a small property and casualty insurer. We're based in Pennsylvania. We also write in another state, and today I'm going to talk about mobile app development and give a little background on what Melville's done and kind of how we got into the mobile app world. If we were in person today, I'd start by saying, asking for a show of hands, how many people have a smartphone? And I'd be probably asking you, how many people used a mobile app this morning so far? And I'd be willing to bet probably everybody's hand went up. It's just kind of the world we live in right now. We all use mobile apps, we all have smartphones, and it's very relevant, this topic, I think, for today, because as you know, most people, consumers in general, are using their phones more and more, and they're using their computers less. So we're migrating away from the traditional website model that we've all used for years, and we're getting more and more into these tiny screens that can do just as much stuff. So for Melville, how did we get to the mobile app world? Well, it kind of was thrust on us. It's been on our to-do list for a while. Had a lot of discussions about it, and then the pandemic hit. And at first, like I'm sure a lot of you guys, we weren't totally sure what that was going to look like. And with us having a lot of independent agents, we weren't sure if they were going to be open, if our policyholders would be able to access their agents to do some transactions on their policies and get information to us and communicate with us through that channel. So we realized that it was time to bump it up, that we needed to increase ways for our policyholders to connect with us. So it went from, okay, it'd be nice to have a mobile app because that's what a lot of companies are doing. That's kind of what the consumer expects now, to we need a mobile app because it may be another communication channel that makes it easier for our policyholders to do business with us. So that's kind of where what ramped up our development on that and got us into mobile apps. So today I have a couple slides to show you. I just want to start by showing you the 3 basic types of apps that we looked at. I think these are probably the 3 most common apps you'll run into just industry-wide. And I'll tell you kind of Melville's approach, how the direction we went and what we ended up settling on and why that worked for us. So 3 types that I talk about. We'll talk about progressive web apps, native apps, and hybrid apps. And so I'll give you a brief overview of each one of them, and I think they'll give you a good understanding of the direction that we ended up in. So progressive web apps, it's a term that's been coming out the last couple of years. It's what we started with when we first looked at it. It's not really an app if you go by true definition of what an app is. Progressive web apps, to make it simple, I would say they're really just a mobile-friendly website that runs on a phone, but they don't run in a browser. They actually install and look and feel like an app, but they're really just a website. Some of the pros, they're free. They're very quick to set up. When I say quick to set up, depending on your experience with it and how your mobile website is, that setup can be done in a matter of a couple hours or definitely within a couple days. And because they're quick and free, it's a really great way if you're thinking about getting an app to get started. It's a great way to get a concept going, get it to your different teams, maybe your marketing team, your product teams, even your different underwriting claims departments, so they can work with it, see what capabilities that you can get out of it. It really it's a great way to conceptualize and visualize what your app can offer and how that benefits your policyholders. We looked at the progressive web app, got one up pretty quick actually, really liked it. Then we started running into some issues with it. Main thing is compatibility. They work really well on Android devices, not so much on Apple devices, iOS and Safari, which is your standard default for most Apple devices. I won't say they won't support progressive web apps. They will, from what I'm told, and I've seen some examples that do. We ran into a lot of issues with compatibility, especially older versions, people that haven't updated their phones. So just like with, people having different versions of browsers, and as Nate mentioned in the last session, the dreaded Internet Explorer 7, 8, 9, that kind of thing. You run into that with mobile devices also. So compatibility was definitely a big issue for us, and one that was big enough that we realized it just wasn't going to work because we couldn't guarantee that our app was going to work across platform for all of our policyholders. And of course, the other part of the progressive web app is you really need a true mobile website. A lot of people, including us, had a mobile-friendly website, but it wasn't really what I would call a quote-unquote true mobile website. There are certain requirements for progressive web apps that you can find online all over the place. But the good thing is there's tools that we found that allow you to test your site to make sure it is compatible to run as a progressive web app. Chrome actually has one built into their developer tools, so it's right there on everybody's system already. It's called Lighthouse, and prior to this, I had never used Lighthouse, and after a couple hours, I felt like I was pretty advanced and efficient at using it. So great features to use. You can get into it very easily with that. So since we couldn't go with the progressive approach because it just wasn't compatible enough and we didn't feel comfortable enough with it, we said, okay, well then what's the other option? Let's look at a native app. Native app is what you traditionally think of with an app for a phone or a tablet. It's the true real app. Generally speaking, it's going to have the longest development time of the 3 types that we're talking about because you're basically going to build it from the ground up. And depending on what development approach you take, it's not hard to find yourself working with coding languages for both Android and iOS. So now you're developing the same thing for 2 different systems. So it does have a higher cost. If you're doing it yourself in-house, obviously that cost is in time a lot. There are a lot of vendors out there that can provide you a really nice native app. They've already built a shell that you can then just start plugging features into. So it's definitely something you could look into also. But again, you're going to have a little more cost with that because there's just more development that goes into it. Native apps offer the best feature set for sure. That's because they're native installed on the phone. So you guys have all probably installed apps and seen where it asks you for permissions. And if you give those permissions, the app can access all the features the phone can offer. That can include things like biometric login, or if you're on an Apple device, Face Unlock, Face ID. You can also access location services and get the very close proximity GPS location. Things like that are all available to a native app. And then they don't really need a mobile website. Certainly you can connect a mobile website to a native app, which we'll talk about in a minute. But most native apps generally use APIs for communication rather than accessing a website directly. So we looked at the native app, definitely was an option, but looking at it and with our limited experience with it, with the development of those kind of technologies, we realized the time frame we were looking at, it just didn't fit that great. So it wasn't really the best option for us. So that brings us to our third type of app, which is a hybrid app. What's a hybrid app? Well, it's a native app that's basically main and possibly its only function is to work like a browser and display a mobile website. So it's an actual app. It installs on the phone. It looks and functions like an app because it is an app, but it doesn't do a lot of those API calls. It doesn't necessarily access all the phone functions. It mainly just, its purpose is to show a mobile-friendly website that is compatible with your phone. Pretty low cost to get these, very short development time. There are services out there, including, that's what the kind of approach we use. There are tons of services that you can Google and find a dozen of, but there are services out there that you can go out, put the address of your mobile website, and it will create your app for you in a matter of minutes. Put some information in and wait for the link in your email, and then you can go view your app and you can start to customize it and play with it. So it's a really cool feature that's out there now, technology that's come around. These hybrid apps definitely can utilize some of the phone features. Most of the ones that we found were set up where you basically would just have your mobile website and maybe a couple, like an About Us page or something on your app if you wanted that feature. And then if you wanted to add some of the more advanced features that we talked about, like biometrics or face unlock or specific location services, those are usually additional modules that come at additional cost. But the good thing is, a lot of the basic features that you want for an insurance app, perhaps like camera access, that will work without any special settings or modules. So you might find that you don't need too many add-ins, that the standard features work great. And since its main function is to display that the view of the mobile website, you still need to have that compatible mobile-friendly website. So how do you get started with an app, or how did Melville get started? Well, the basic steps we took on our journey, just going through those apps, we had looked at the progressive web app, realized it just wasn't going to be totally compatible for us, that we were comfortable with it. Looked at the native app, realized it was just longer development time than we wanted and maybe a little higher cost. And so we looked at the hybrid approach. We had a mobile-friendly website. We had to do some adjustments to it just to make it truly work on a phone and be cross-device compatible, but we managed to do that. So my suggestion, if you're looking at an app, is start with that. Get a mobile-friendly website up, and then build a progressive web app. They're pretty simple. I will tell you, I had never built one or had much experience one before I started. It did not take me very long. So definitely for many of you on this call, it will not take you long either to build one. There's a lot of guides on Google. Just do a quick search on it, and they walk you step by step how to do it. Very easy at no cost. So we built a progressive web app, and we got it in the hands of different teams at our company to say, what features, here's what we thought we wanted to offer, but take a look at this, try it out, play with it, see what's working, what's not working. And that kind of gave us some good feedback, so we could go and continue to customize our app and get it just the way we thought we wanted it.
Hey Chris, I just have a question real quick. BJ.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just you had mentioned about the app and having a mobile website. Do the apps or the apps you guys have put out there have any offline capabilities when the user's not connected to the internet?
Yeah, so that's a great question, BJ. With progressive web apps and even hybrid apps, there is offline capability, but I would say it is limited. The design of those is to be connected and be online. So you can have some nice offline capability where you can get a page that pops up and says, "Oh, looks like you're not connected right now. Please access us later when you're back online again." That kind of thing. But generally speaking, they're not syncing data down and storing it offline for offline access. If that's a feature or requirement that you're going to use as a company, then native apps get into that where they're actually storing database type information on the phone for offline access. So great question, thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we so after we went the PWA route, then we went the hybrid route, and we actually went, and I'm going to show you guys some vendors here that we used, that we looked at. These are some of the, there's again dozens of these vendors out there on the internet. So my recommendation is check a bunch of them out, see what features they offer, and compare that to the features that you're looking for your business. But these were some of the popular ones that we came across that were pretty highly rated, and they're great. Great way to get into an app without a lot of cost and time involved. Most of these vendors offer the ability to build it, and then you can, once you build it, after a couple minutes, they'll have your app generated for you, and they'll give you a link, you can download it, and then you can actually install it on a device and actually test it out like an actual user. Usually that's going to be an Android. It's very easy to sideload apps on Android. Not as much on iOS, but you can do it. But most of the vendors I came across were willing to work with Android a lot more easily to get you started, and then once you had it all built, roll it to Apple devices.
So we've got a question here, Chris.
Yeah.
What are some of the items to watch out for when vendors when searching for apps?
Yeah, I think you want to not all the vendors offer the same feature set. So you know, for instance, if you want to offer the ability to for the user to save their password to use biometrics, such as, you know, fingerprint unlock or face unlock, some of the vendors offer that capability, some don't. So you want to look at, you know, if you're completely satisfied with the idea that if you're going to use a hybrid app, that you can just use your mobile website and that's all your users need, and they don't need any special features, then I think you can be, you know, looking at the vendors, you just want to look at which one seems like the best fit for you, both cost-wise and support-wise going forward. If you're looking to have a little more add-in capability, then you're going to want to find a vendor that also has some of those options. For us, I would actually say one of the things I would look for, with us, me personally, I had never published an app before. So some of the vendors offer a lot of assistance, not just getting the app running, but also getting it published into the app stores, into Google Play and into the Apple App Store. And that's actually a bit of a process, more than I thought it was going to be, especially with Apple. So, you know, it was very helpful for us. They partnered with us, if you will, to not just generate our app and help us get it finished building, but then also to get it live so that people could start downloading it. There's stories out there of people that have gone round and round with the app stores to get it approved, and they just couldn't get it approved. So I would suggest, if you don't have a lot of familiarity with that kind of process, maybe looking for one of the vendors that kind of guarantees the ability to get it published quickly. They know how to navigate that landscape.
Another question, Chris. What was the kind of the business use cases that you see for an initial app?
Yeah, so I think for us, you know, we wanted to see what kind of self-service could we offer our policyholders. Classic example, I think, is let's just take simple claims. When a policyholder has a claim, they want to be able to a lot of times follow up themselves. They don't have to keep calling in and going through an automated phone system or following up with their agent and having their agent tell them, well, let me call the company and get back to you. They want that direct self-service. So being able to provide our policyholders information about their claim directly at their fingertips, and then being able to have them help us out with the claim. So, you know, classic example, oh, you called and opened a claim because a tree blew across your driveway and now you can't get in your garage and you want tree removal. Okay, well, take your phone out and take a picture and send it to us. And I'm sure you guys have all experienced, there are people out there that are very good at taking pictures and sending it into your insurance company. And there are a lot of people that say, well, I know how to take a picture, but I have no idea how to do anything else with it or get it to you. So that our intent was just to be able to ease the communication between the policyholder and us for things like that. You know, working with your claim, getting us photos, getting information about it. checking on payments, paying their bill. A lot of people call us and say, can I pay my bill on the phone? And now you can. So that kind of was the direction we headed with. It was just the simple things that a lot of us are already doing, just getting it so we can do it from the phone seamlessly.
We have an interesting question here with, it's a good point, with all the core systems vendors, some of them are developing their apps for their own area or their own domain. So, you know, for example, you have multiple siloed apps provided by those vendors, but yet you have to provide a common experience. You have any thoughts on that? Actually, it's probably a good question for anybody. It's a good point.
Yeah, that is a good question. And, you know, I guess that's the trade-off is if you have a core system that's with a vendor that kind of offers the app integration, obviously they're most likely going to have a great way to get into the app world with that, but it may not talk to all your other systems. I suppose that's kind of a case-by-case scenario is how does that communicate with the app? Is there, are there APIs? Are there connections you can make behind the scenes that you could, you know, extract data, pull it around and make your own to draw all those sources together? If so, that's great. If that's not always the case, I don't know if I have a solid answer on that one. I guess you'd have to look and see what which direction you could go with it.
Yeah, I think that's a good forward-looking type of question because a lot of us are just trying to get out of the gate running, right? And then we'll find out, uh-oh, now we want to add more functionality. How do we get this common experience?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, might be actually a good follow-up for our committee to talk about for future dialogue there. If anybody has any comments in the audience or any of the panels there, feel free to chime in.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
I had a question. What were some of the experiences you encountered when, you know, dealing with iOS versus Android? It seems as if Android was easier to navigate through versus iOS.
Yeah, Android being a more open system with a lot more ability to manipulate it, whereas Apple keeps their system pretty locked down, generally speaking. I think that's what you run into. From the app side, you know, like I said, you can sideload apps into Android all day long with just changing a setting, and you can actually do that in Apple, but it's just more complicated. The risk you run, of course, is, you know, Android lets you do it, but it opens up more security holes depending what kind of app you're installing. Whereas I think that's where Apple keeps it locked down pretty good so that they can ensure security. The biggest thing we ran into was not so much that. It happens to be that I'm an Android guy, so testing out the app on Android wasn't too much of a problem for me. And luckily, the other guy in the project with me, he's an Apple guy, so we each had devices we could play with. The one thing we ran into a lot was when we got to publishing, we were able to get published with Google probably in a day or two. It was a pretty quick process. Getting it published with Apple, even with the support of our vendor that was helping us out, that was a marathon. That took about 2.5, 3 weeks to start to finish. And we didn't run into much trouble with it. It just was a long, drawn-out process going through all the approvals and different steps.
Gotcha. Well, no, thank you for that, Chris. Yeah, because I'm an iPhone guy, so that's what drove my question. Because it seemed like iPhone was a real thorn in your side.
Yeah, you know, it's this traditional, just like with when you're making websites, you know, as everyone who's a website designer knows, you got to be cross-compatible because you've got 50% of the population using, if you're using Windows, they're using probably, you know, Explorer or Edge, Edge or Chrome. And if they're an Apple or Mac user, they're probably using Safari. And Safari and Chrome don't always think the same way. And we ran into the same issues with the phones and with the apps.
Gotcha.
So,
Right.
So
Chris,
this was I'm going to go ahead and hold any future questions, unfortunately. And what we're going to do is we'll go through all these sessions, and if we have time at the end, if the panelists wouldn't mind, you know, getting back into a roundtable and any of the questions that we don't answer. Bala, I know you have one. If you have a question or comment, please put it in the questions and answers area, and I'm going to leave it open And then when we finish off the 4 sessions, I'm going to come back to the open questions. So this was really good dialogue. These slides will be, I believe we're recording, so we'll have them available. But one of the key things here we want you to do is learn from one another and, you know, get context too, because it's good to dialogue offline as well. So now I am going to thank Chris. I learned a lot in that too. I've got a scratching my head in this area a little bit, and we're going to turn it over to BJ Gardner and Dave Ziegenfuss from Pennsylvania Lumbermen's Mutual to talk about disaster recovery as a service. Capital D, capital R, small a, capital S. That's what we're seeing in the publications everywhere. Well, you know, what does it mean? How do we make this successful? So turn it over to you.
Okay.
Yeah, Dave, you want to put up just our slides real quick? While he's doing that, I'll just introduce myself. I'm BJ Gardner with Pennsylvania Lumbermen's Mutual Insurance Company. I've been with the company for about 15 years and currently manage the help desk and network operations. I have about 20 years experience in infrastructure and network operations. I bring pretty solid IT industry skills and experience to my role. Current role consists of data center and capacity planning, cloud infrastructure, and disaster recovery, including disaster recovery as a service, which is our topic now. I span the industries of media, education, and insurance. So with that, I'm just gonna have Dave introduce himself before we start.
Yeah, hi guys. I'm the IT senior architect with Pennsylvania Lumbermen's. I've been with them just over 6 years. I manage the VMware environment, the backup management systems, patch management systems, our on-site AV system. And in recent times, I had been brought on to be part of the planning for our disaster recovery as a service. And as of now, I still have a management role in that process, all things regarding our testing and just overseeing of that environment. So yeah, that's pretty much me. I got over 20 years experience. I did have spent a majority of it in the insurance industry, ironically. Yeah, I'm a real people person, so I do enjoy the opportunity to step back into my old life and work with our help desk team, and even you know, work amongst our end users to help them with their day-to-day issues where needed. So,
All right, thanks, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna begin by just giving a little high level of our story, like you see on the slide there, and Dave will go into some of the more detailed or technical areas of our disaster recovery solution. You know, first off, you know, it's been a gradual journey to the cloud and also to you know, the disaster recovery as a service model for us at PLM. You know, we went traditional. We had tapes. You know, we went from tapes to disk storage on-prem, and then disk storage in a colo, and then a hosted, you know, disaster solution. You know, all the way to where we had a replicated site in a different region, and then we migrated to this current solution, which is kind of as a service model. So hosting a private cloud environment in New Jersey with a VMware cloud provided partner. We had a data center in Atlanta for our disaster recovery solutions. But we were managing it pretty much. They just provided, you know, the area for us to, you know, sync up our vCenters and, you know, send our replicated and backup data over to it. And, you know, we ran into a period of time where we were running a little lean in the network space, and, you know, we lost headcount, and we weren't sure what direction we were going to go. You know, so we were down resource. You know, the Atlanta data center was tough for us to manage and keep going on a daily basis. So, you know, our vendor kind of pitched the model to us that they could manage our disaster recovery services. And it was of interest to us, and we saw some benefit both from a resources standpoint and flexibility standpoint. So we did start that process up, and, you know, I'm happy to say that we are running in that model now, and we've seen a lot of benefits from it, you know, as we've done this since the end of 2018 into 2019 is where it really started running. So I'm going to hand it over to Dave so he can kind of give some of the technical, parts of this model and, where we were and where we are now.
Okay. Thanks, Paige.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in comparison to our initial solution being Veeam, on-demand testing, we found it quite limited. Any of us who've spent any time in the IT industry know how this goes with DR. You're either doing it late night, weekends. So it's nice to have some more flexibility as far as your overall testing. Compare that to our present solution with VMware Cloud using SRM at AWS. We found it could be performance could be it could be done at any time, day or night, and we can accomplish our goals with our DR testing. We also found, again, I'm speaking more from the context of what prompted us to move away from our initial solution, that being Veeam, to VMware Cloud on AWS. So we were finding a number of shortfalls with Veeam. Some of our re-IPing of our machines in our Atlanta data center in order to even do testing. It was a bit cumbersome. Compare that in contrast to VMware Cloud using SRM. The protection plan and the recovery plan designs were flawless, at least from our findings thus far. All that went away almost immediately. So I'm a big fan of that. The other thing that was definitely a plus was with SRM, that being Site Recovery Manager, we had RPO, so that's Recovery Point Objective. So depending on how mission critical any particular system is, we could control replication anywhere from 5 minutes to 24 hours. With Veeam, not so much. We were dependent on scheduling of jobs in order to do replication, and if you tried to do 5 minutes replication apart, the jobs would stomp on each other, so to speak. So it was a win-win all around. Aside from the cost that came along with getting rid of that data center in Atlanta, again, just another win there. So yeah, we're quite happy with the move that we made, and just the time that it provides us back. Again, like BJ said, being down a man, it really did give us more time to focus on other objectives and not have to be so involved with maintaining of an entire infrastructure and overall securing of our data for DR purposes.
Hey, Dave, so what as a service provider in this model, what are they providing to us that we would have generally done on in staff prior?
Well, in staff prior, I mean, we had to first keep an eye on all of our jobs. Did they run correctly? Did we have any failures or shortfalls? We also had additional resources that had to be maintained within the Atlanta data center. Those were a couple things right off the top that I could think of.
Gotcha. So if there's any questions, you guys can go ahead and put some questions in the Q&A, or if you're a panelist, you can just jump on in and ask a question. Some general information about the migration to this model. Some of the challenges we were facing, as I stated, was headcount, resources on site, cost structure, and unreliable connectivity. I can say one of the pieces we kept running into was connectivity in between our Philly data center and the colo model in Atlanta. You have to kind of have private circuits to do work like that, and we were having some unreliable connectivity into the model, whereas this can run over, IPsec or even public internet with secure, protocols to get to, the DR as a service model. So, the time needed to convert from the colo type model into a service model was about 4 months. That doesn't include the contracting and stuff with the renewal process we were going through, but about 4 months to get everything provisioned and seeded from our 2 data centers that feed the disaster recovery model. So it wasn't a whole lot of time. And as Dave can attest, the provisioning and the seeding was not taxing on our internal network or even our internal resources. So that was fairly positive as well. As far as cost structure, it's a very similar cost structure to the services they're providing are very similar. You still have to do you still need the same service level that you had. We could produce our own recovery points and everything, so we could keep that all the same. But it was we did see an overall savings annually of about 20% over just the cost of the service itself. Like I said, we lost the connectivity, we lost a circuit that we didn't have to pay for, and the service itself was a little bit cheaper than running basically the least hardware we were using in the colo model. So we do have a couple of questions coming in.
Yep, I've got one here from Dan Borges. Does the AWS solution use an on-prem device?
Dave, you want to take that one?
The on-prem solution at AWS, no, it's dependent on Site Recovery Manager, and that it's basically it's the other sites, your sites that you want to protect. They have an SRM appliance set up in each, which allow you to accomplish the creation of the site links. Outside of that, no, there's nothing else there at AWS that's dependent on.
So Dave, just expand on that just a tad. What do we have in our 2 data centers that would be considered on-prem, I guess you could say, that do connect into the AWS environment as far as configuration?
Well, we have two SRM appliances. They come to you as an OVF. So they're spun up and configured so that they can make their connectivity through the AWS interconnect. So to be honest with you, a lot of the site link establishment was helped along by our cloud provider, who basically ventured into this agreement with VMware in order to provide us this service. So I'm a little light on some of the back end, what was done from that end. But as far as I'm concerned, the SRM appliances in each of our 2 sites, with their connectivity, they provide the ability for the establishing of your site links at VMware Cloud on AWS. I hope that answered something there.
BJ and Dave, can I ask you guys a quick question real quick? For people that have mainframe systems such as like IBM that are more legacy, I know we've ran in this past where it's hard to find recovery services that offer the same kind of support for like a Windows or a standard Linux server. Do you know, does your disaster recovery service that Amazon offers, does that pick up things like mainframes pretty easily, or is that much more difficult? Have you experienced that?
Well, yeah, Chris, we have a Linux Red Hat system that, by all accounts, is somewhat quite aged, and replication of that and getting it to AWS, we have encountered no issues whatsoever. Now, on the back end, I want to be transparent. We actually have not run a recovery attempt yet with the Linux either. But getting it to AWS, we've seen no hiccup whatsoever.
Cool, thanks.
Stephen has a question. Did you set up the virtual environment yourself in the cloud or use a consultant? And have you done a complete DR test using just the cloud virtual environment? And are you now running replication every 5 minutes? So first question there, did you set up the virtual environment yourself in the cloud or use a consultant?
Well, we utilized our cloud provider. Our cloud provider is the one who ventured into the agreement with VMware. So then they passed along the service to us. So a lot of the interconnectivity did come from our cloud provider initially. What was the next question?
About the DR test. Have we tested it yet using the cloud virtual environment? I think I know the answer to that because I know what we're doing this year. So, yep.
We have, and this actually is what won me over. You know, the recovery plans again were flawless. Going back to Veeam again, where we just struggled with, you know, getting our machines to properly re-IP within, you know, the subnet that they were assigned. This like clockwork. And we were also able to silo, so to speak, our testing environment. I'd be happy to outline some of what was done, that solution that we came up with to place another domain controller there that basically allowed us. This is where the beauty of on-demand testing at any time came in, because we created this domain controller there at AWS that does not have a replica partner. However, it does receive replication only once a day in the evening from its partner, one of the other domain controllers. It doesn't act in a global catalog role. It still serves up all our DNS zones. However, it'll never replicate those recovered systems with the DR IP address scheme back to which you would never want. So we really feel like we did a nice job on accomplishing that siloing, which also allowed us for extremely flexible alternatives for testing at any time. We could test at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when business is in full swing, and no one would know any wiser.
And how about that? You started just talking about the replication for that one domain controller, but in general for the systems, are you running replication every 5 minutes? Is the question.
That varies. It's on a case by case basis. It depends on the importance, you know, how critical a specific system is and what it provides and what it hosts. So that does vary. But again, with Recovery Point Objective, it's fantastic. You can, again, replicate any given system 5 minutes to 24 hours where, you know, one system, you know, doesn't have as much critical mass, so to speak. So you could say, we could replicate this once every 12 hours. Wow, but this system really should be done every, you know, especially if you have a large file server that's active, you know, with changes. So you might want to have that 5 minutes, but a lot of flexibility once again.
Good. We have 2 more questions in here from James McGann. From a budget perspective, this is an operating expense model. Is it versus capitalizing the hardware? Actually, I could probably answer this as far as navigating that hurdle. For us, we don't, to be honest with you, compared to other companies that I've worked for, we don't have that big hurdle on capital versus expense. So we've got a lot of support in that area. You're going to wind up depreciating things anyway over a period, so you're going to pay for it and expense it, and it's going to hit the budget one way or another.
Yeah, I can answer. I can just throw in one more comment. And to us, in our scenario, and you'll hear me speak in the afternoon session about this as well, so I don't want to go too much into it, but we had real estate constraints that kind of, again, didn't force our hand, but had us really think about how we're going to handle hardware in general and putting it in the data center, which kind of pushed us out to a private cloud and even now more as a service models. So it wasn't all budget that was really a concern. It was we didn't have a place to put things physically at that point. Again, we could have moved more to colo, but we ended up more private cloud instead of colo.
And we had the savings too that came on top of it. So that's
Yeah.
always a good motivating factor. Was the year-over-year savings. We have time for one last question here, which comes a follow-up from Lydia. Are we using duplicate IPs in our setup to what is at your home office location?
Dave can answer, but it's no.
No. No.
Alrighty, so this was a great discussion. We appreciate having the perspectives from both the business standpoint and the overall project, as well as those snags way down under the covers. I think Dave did put his email address out there. So, feel free to jot that down. We are always open for dialogue and sharing and helping one another. So thank you, BJ and Dave. And now we're going to move with Nick Tommen, and he's going to, and if I butchered your last name, again, my apologies, with Brethren Mutual Insurance Company. And we're going to talk about Office 365 with a focus on SharePoint. So I'm personally looking forward to this conversation.
All right. Hopefully you guys can see my screen and you can hear me.
Yes. At least
yeah. All right.
Here you go.
All right. So let me go ahead and my name's Nick Tommen. I'm a senior engineer at Brethren Mutual Insurance. I've been with them for almost 2 years now. I think like next week or end of this week, it's 2 years. Prior to this, I've been at in the financial IT services for 16 years. So this is kind of a new world for me, a lot of new terminology I needed to pick up. But the people at Brethren have been great. And one of the tasks I got thrown on my lap as soon as I started was to help with their SharePoint implementation. And I had previous experience, about 7 years experience in SharePoint with my previous employer, where we did on-prem and Office 365. What I want to talk about here is my goal is to kind of explain some key steps needed to have a successful SharePoint migration. A lot of migrations fail. And so I've been part of a project team where it's failed. So we've learned kind of a process over trial and error where that seems to work well. And my goal here is to actually train you on the ins and outs of SharePoint, more so on what you need to do to prepare yourself for a successful project and avoid a failure. SharePoint's not easy. I'll just give you that, right? So there's really 5 steps you need to kind of prepare yourself for. So we'll just kind of go through these steps, and if you have questions, just feel free to interrupt me as needed. So the first decision when you're getting ready to do a SharePoint implementation is, are you going to go with Office 365 or on-prem? There's pros and cons to both. For on-prem, your pro is control. You control when you do your updates. You control when you do your upgrades. There are some more customization options available to you. The cons are it's very complex. I would say it's a little bit harder than a well-designed Exchange environment. So for those of you who are engineers and work with large exchange farms, it's kind of on par, if not more. Feature updates are delayed. So anything that Microsoft's doing and you get really excited about, good luck. You're not going to see it for at least another year before it shows up on-prem. And just complex maintenance. So you have to really plan your maintenance strategy around SharePoint, because you could cause an outage if you either designed or implemented a patch wrong or anything like that. With Office 365, the pro is there's no servers to manage. You get the latest updates and patches, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. Depends on how good your company is to adapting to changes. And that's where all the new features come first. The cons is you have no control. So when Microsoft decides to roll something out, you might get a warning email saying this feature is coming or going, but you don't really have a choice of when you're going to get it. There is limited customizations, and something to kind of warn yourself on. If you're moving your files to 365, know there's going to be now a WAN bandwidth constriction. So you just need to be aware of that. Don't plan to run your 500-person company over, a dial-up connection or something like that. It just is not going to work. So kind of keep an eye on your bandwidth and make sure things are running smoothly in your environment. For example, in this slide, to the left is an on-prem SharePoint 2013 infrastructure that was designed at my previous company that I worked for. We were an international company with over 1,000 people and had an IT infrastructure staff of 15. We had compliance regulations that we had to deal with, and we could not tolerate any downtime. So that was coming from the top. So with those requirements, we had to design redundancy into every aspect of the platform, and we had that included network, server, databases. It worked well, but it was a pain to maintain. So after a year, we actually were able to scale back some of the servers in this service because it was just too much to handle, and it was almost over-engineered. We actually did work with a consulting company to help us come up with this design. But after trying to work and maintain such a large environment for years, I would never, ever do SharePoint on-prem again. All right. So if you are looking at SharePoint, go to the cloud.
We do have one question here from Ron.
Okay.
Yeah, while you're talking about 365, did you look at the Google product, the formerly called G Suite, now called Google Workspace?
The company was already, Brethren was already on a path with Office 365. So you kind of just jumped on it and ran with it. And then in the past, with 2013, we actually did the on-prem because Office 365 SharePoint was still fairly new. And there was concerns of its reliability and usability and compliance regulations because they were still kind of fuzzy. But as for G Suite or anything, no. Though I do have a friend he pushes Google all the time. So if you need somebody, I can forward that along to you.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So the first step or the second step is planning. And this is where most SharePoint implementations fail. And the first thing you kind of need to realize is SharePoint is not a file server, okay? I wish we could do this all in person because it's really important. SharePoint is not a file server. So repeat after me. SharePoint is not a file server. This is too many server engineers or whatever say, oh, let me just throw up SharePoint as a replacement file server, maybe throw up one server, start dumping files on it, and everything goes wrong. All right. The first decision you need to make is who's going to train you. You need to take ownership of what the platform is, know how it's used, know the ins and outs as much as possible before you even decide to roll it out in your organization. If there's some great courses and conferences out there. If you don't start this first, chances are your implementation is going to fail. For me, I was lucky enough to go to a Microsoft Ignite conference multiple times. If you're not familiar with Ignite, it's pretty much everything Microsoft sells and Microsoft vendors sell. And you can actually go down different course tracks. And so the 2 years that I went back to back, I was all SharePoint all the time, pretty much. And it was invaluable. But before you even start building a server, throwing stuff up, you want to start figuring out how your site is going to be organized. At the top right here is a map of what we, is a map of kind of the design of layout, how we're going to do SharePoint at Brethren. You want to use a hub site as your primary starting point. Hub sites are kind of like Google. It's going to be like your Google search, where all your documents are going to bubble up to that site. Any news postings or events being posted on other department sites or sites down the chain will all be available there. So it's almost the central port for your organization.
Nick, we have another great question. Does SharePoint support straightforward file sharing with users outside your organization, or is OneDrive a better Microsoft tool for that feature? And can they work together?
So for outside the organization, you're going to have to go through the browser to get, so the web browser gets your files that's shared to somebody outside the company. It's not actually that big of a deal because especially like the Office apps, they're able to interact as if it's a local file share. The OneDrive sync tool itself currently doesn't support syncing for guest access. It might have changed, but I know up to like a year ago, it didn't support guest syncing. But I kind of have I can talk about that now, but the OneDrive tool is nice. The platform's nice. The actual client syncing part, I'll touch on that a little bit further on in my presentation. I think that was the two questions. Oh, you muted.
Sorry about that. I also have another question on what types of throughput requests per second, throttling, etc. Have you seen any issues with the Cloud 365 version?
The only time I actually hit a throttling issue was during the actual migration of content from our on-prem. So I made sure I scheduled that after hours. So as soon as the business ended, I'd start my migration scripts, go home. By the time I get home, I'd check to see if anything finished or if there's any errors, and then check again next morning. I had to be doing a lot of migration of data and cover multiple times throughout the day to even hit that cap that Microsoft limits. And unfortunately, there's no if you do this, you get capped. It's just a fuzzy, all of a sudden you just start seeing weird, all of a sudden pages stop loading and stuff, and it's Microsoft capping you. Does that answer the question there?
Well, we can get a follow-up there. So any of the attendees that ask a question, just raise your hand or shoot another Q&A over if you need further discussion on any of these topics.
Okay. One of the things you want to make sure you do, what we did is we did a site for each department. So you're actually creating sites. Before Microsoft, before hub sites were introduced, they were making a push for you would create a sub site for each, say, other department or whatnot. That's pretty much been thrown out. You want to actually create a dedicated site for each department or group, however you're going to be organizing your site, and then tie them all together with the hub site. So just be aware of that. Sub-site usage is actually kind of phasing out. The other decision you need to make is access. Should employees have access to everything? Read-only rights, edit rights, it's going to be different depending on your company and maybe the site itself. That's actually very important because of that hub site functionality and then some other tools that are built into Office 365 like Delve and things like that. Any interaction you have with somebody, it's going to start showing files they worked on and things your colleagues are working on that might be important to you. And so if you have even read-only access, somebody may accidentally be able to see these files, even if you don't want them. So something to be aware of when you're doing your planning.
Yeah. And one more question, Chris. BJ's asking if you automated any business processes in SharePoint.
I did, and I'll show you that at the end. I'll try to flip through these. I know we're kind of short on time, so
Excellent.
towards the end, I'll show an example of one of them that we did.
Okay, fantastic.
The deployment strategy that worked well so far, and it worked well at Brethren, and it worked well at my last company, was do OneDrive first. It's like SharePoint Lite. It's literally SharePoint, but it's just a personal SharePoint site for your individuals. And it gets people used to learning how to sync, how to share files, because it does behave a little bit different now that you're, especially through Outlook and things like that. It's just a good familiarization of the platform before you actually jump to SharePoint. So while you get your OneDrive out, you want to go ahead and teach, that's a good teachable moment. Another part of your deployment strategy is find your champion. So who is a champion? Champion is someone that is more or less fed up with the way things are in your environment. They have some technical skill, but it's really not required. But they have opinions. They're familiar with how your data is kind of organized and shared throughout the business, and they can kind of help you figure out, how you're going to organize things in SharePoint. They're also become now invested in your project, so it's not no longer an IT-driven project. It's a business project, and so they help kind of curb when there's problems starting to pop up. They can help let you know that somebody's complaining about it. Your rollout or something in SharePoint, and you can kind of tackle those problems ahead of time and squash them before they get out of control. And then finally, a training plan for the entire organization. Users will not just figure this out. And we made this mistake with our first SharePoint implementation. We just said, hey, we'll throw stuff there and they'll figure it out because it's like a file share. Nope. And people get confused and everything breaks. So let's go ahead and move to the next. Step 3, and this is another reason why things fail. You need to do some house cleaning. Everybody hates to clean and do your spring cleaning. You're gonna find when you sit with your team and your different departments, you got duplicate data everywhere. You got people moving files from one place to the other. They're not using the most current information. So you're going to have to figure out where the source is and figure out, then where should that live afterwards. And what we've done is we actually worked with each department head, brought in our champion, and literally just went through the file share. We didn't necessarily open up every single file, but we went through every folder that was in the file server and said, okay, what's this stuff? Is this something you're creating or is this coming from some other place? Why is it here? And start asking those questions. A tip is create 2 folders. And wherever you're working, when you're starting a migration, and do the Z so it's at the bottom. And one say it's moved to SharePoint or it's archived. And as you do this meeting, as soon as somebody says, yeah, we don't need this stuff, move it to the archive folder. Don't even keep it along in that library. And then when you're finally starting to move these files into SharePoint, when you're done with that migration, move them into the move to SharePoint. So when people go to because you might not have trained everybody yet in SharePoint, depending on how big your organization is, they'll go there, they'll say, oh, this got moved to SharePoint, let me go to SharePoint so I know where the most current version is. And pro tip here, make those folders read-only, because people will continue to work out of those if you don't. And then you just have to do delta syncs, and it's not fun. Let's see. And make sure in these cleanup meetings, you're asking questions. Why is this here? Start thinking about metadata. You can have these discussions, and some of your meetings may get really long as you start discussing metadata and how to better organize this data. Chances are that they've already been kind of doing metadata, they're just not didn't realize it in just way they've been naming folders. Things can get pretty deep. And then if all else fails, you just say, okay, give a cutoff date, say we'll only move X years back of data, and that's it. Similar to your other platforms we talked about today with the migration. I don't like that option, but sometimes it's necessary. So try to avoid that as a last resort. All right. So we're still doing some house cleaning. Some tips to look into. There's a tool out there called check folder character lengths. There are character limits when you're working with 365 or with SharePoint. So that, and that's including the folder name, the full path, along with the file name. So you'll want to run a tool like this or something similar to actually get the count of what your environment currently is and what it would be to make sure you're not going over character lengths. If you do, you're going to want to reorganize that data on the file server first and then bring it into SharePoint. Don't do it in SharePoint after. It's just too hard. You'll have to get some other tools to do it. So it's easier to do it on the file share first. If your Office is not already using the new DocX and XLXX formats, the modern file formats for Office, make that change now. I would make that change even if you don't go to SharePoint, make that change now. You can put in a group policy in place to start forcing and defaulting files to that file format when they create new, because you will need to convert these old files into the new ones. And it's kind of labor intensive. There are some tools out there you can find, or you can write some PowerShell scripts to do it. But if you don't, some of the functionality like collaboration and syncing are going to have issues in SharePoint. And then if you're using PST files on user machines for Outlook archiving, you're going to want to suck those back into SharePoint, or sorry, into that mailbox and Exchange Online and use the archiving functionality there. PST files, I hate them. This is just me coming from financial services with lots of lawyers. They're awful, so get rid of them. Just use other archive and discovery methods and get rid of the PSTs. So finally, we're getting to the migration. There are a couple tools out there. When I first started, Microsoft didn't have a migration tool. The only real option was ShareGate and maybe some other third-party tools. Microsoft's migration tool, I was actually pretty surprised. It was pretty good for what we needed for a fairly well-organized, as long as you organize your file server cleanly, doing a migration with the free tool was no issues. If you need to do something more advanced, do new metadata mappings and things like that, you're going to want a tool like SharePoint. And if that can't, or sorry, ShareGate. And if ShareGate can't do it, there's no tool that can. ShareGate is the end-all be-all tool for any SharePoint migration. As I said earlier, do your OneDrive first. Get people used to autosave and versioning. Autosave is going to be a complaint, so get ahead of it. What's going to happen is people are going to open up, look at a file, and even don't make a change, but close it. Don't realize autosave was turned on. And to the next person, when they go look, it's going to say that was modified by somebody else. They're going to say, oh, no, I never modified it. I just looked at it. So you want to be aware of that and train people on that. And the way around that problem, the easiest, is just change it in the file properties. So there's, in all of Office products, there's a always at open and read-only mode first. You turn that on and you won't have that issue. Then when they're ready to start editing the file, you can then let autosave work. And this is in PowerPoint, Excel, Word. It's going to save you some headaches. Oops, whoa. Sorry.
We've got a minute here, and we'll get wrapped up with this session.
Okay. Yep. I'll and go slow. Yeah, I'll go ahead and skip over. Again, the OneDrive syncing, it's a good transition tool. Use it where you, as people, to get people used to the platform. But as you start doing stuff with more metadata and workflow processes, check-in, check-out, the OneDrive sync tool is going to actually hinder you. So you want to eventually train the people to use the web interface directly. So that was my tip there. So training. Make sure you train yourself, because you will get through this. You'll hit a trough of disillusion if you've been in, know anything with Gartner. It's something they like to do. The first 4 steps is all about, it's going to get you excited, and then you start doing your cleanup work, and that's when everything starts dropping, because you're like, oh man, this is too big and too hard. But as you work with your champions and you work with the company, and as long as you're training them, for this to be successful, it's all training. So you're constantly going back to the business. So plan on spending a lot of time on training, being you, just sitting down and having meetings to discuss problems and learn how to fix them. A lot of it is just users forget because they're busy doing their day-to-day. Work with a consultant if you need to. Just a warning when you're working with a consultant, make sure they're not doing all the work. Make sure you and maybe a champion is with them doing the clicks. That's how I like to do any of my implementations, is if I need to work with a consultant, do the clicks. It just helps with that knowledge transfer. And let's see here. Plan on about a year. No matter how big your company is, it takes about a year to get through these steps. Even if you're big and have lots of data, that's the easy part. It's just going to be the training. And so, you have something, Aaron?
Yep, I think we're going to get kind of transition here to Bella in a minute.
Okay. I just want to show a quick example of why we kind of did all this. We improved search. We narrowed our data down to single sources of the truth. So we got rid of all that duplicate data and reduced and removed redundant work. For instance, in one of our scenarios that we were trying to fix was around our own corporate policy documents. So we actually built a special forms library that's tracking, what line of business this form is related to, the states, and everything else you can think of related to that form. This was something that was all being tracked in a separate Excel file. So now when they actually open and work on a file, it's asking for that information right up front. So you can't even save it unless the required information is filled in. And when complete, what was used to be stored and tracked in a separate Excel file, we can actually now use tools like Power BI to query that data and build nice, quick, searchable reports of our data and what the forms are, easily find what you need, and export this to Excel if somebody needs to. This has been a pretty big help between our product and compliance group and our quality control groups. That was a pretty big success. And then any questions?
Yeah, this is a fantastic topic. I know I got a lot of benefit out of it. Everybody in the audience, take note of Nick's contact information here in case you have any follow-up questions. And the slides will be available for everyone to go back to. I think there's a lot of good information in there. Thank you so much, Nick. And we want to wrap up with our last conversation with Balakumar from JARUS, updating us on what's going on with AI and insurance.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, that was a fantastic presentation, pretty much all the previous speakers. And so let's see whether I can share my screen. You can see my screen. Yes, okay, good, excellent. So unlike other speakers where they presented their specific case study, this we want it to be like more like a roundtable. We want to discuss what's happening out there and what we are doing internally within our group. And so that's how I set it up. So what I'm going to do is give a kind of a little bit of what's happening in broad outside, and then set up the stage so that we can get there. And by the way, I'm Bala Kumar. I'm a co-founder of JARUS. And at JARUS, we provide insurance system framework that helps people to build core systems. And also, we provide complete digital solutions, including mobile app. Chris talked about it. I think the way we approach the mobile apps, just a quick comment, is that since we are insurance guys, we provide a complete insurance specific solution like self-service, all the capabilities, quoting, first notice of loss, payment, authentication. All these capabilities are provided as a package, and you just simply configure it to launch your mobile apps. So all those things are there. That's our slightly different approach. Anyway, we'll get back into the AI for insurance. Now, why is this topic important? As you know, AI is everywhere. It's becoming pervasive, and it has a tremendous potential to disrupt industries, and insurance is not immune to that. And if you look at it financial, you get a call when, hey, there is a potential fraud, somebody using your card, is it a valid transaction? And or people are using it for stock trades. And there are recommendation engines in e-commerce sites and autonomous cars. If you look at Tesla, they already collected 3 billion miles of active people using their autopilot mode, not just driving around. So people are, there's a lot of tremendous amount of information there. And then I think if anyone is interested, you just learn about AlphaZero. That's one that plays chess, Go, and all those kind of games. The interesting thing is you don't teach anything about domain. You just set it up, and within like a couple of days, then it becomes played at a world-class level. That kind of technological advancements are there in these areas. And there are many component technologies. We talk about natural language processing, translation, image recognition, and all those things. So AI is everywhere. Now, there are large platform players like Google, Facebook, IBM, all these people, they set the stage. And then there are a lot of horizontal platform vendors that are providing nifty technologies across different domains. And then what the other trend that is driving is, if you look at it, the sensors, Internet of Things, as we call it, and big data, computational capabilities, all of these are fueling the trend towards kind of leveraging AI in multiple areas. Now, when you come to specifically to insurance, what's happening is that large insurers, they have big teams. They hire like some data scientists, create some center of excellence or something like that to tackle specific use cases and to gain some experience, what is happening, how we can leverage and things like that. So they're doing that internally. And then there are InsureTechs. These are kind of startups. They try to take for example, Lemonade, or there are many companies like that. They take a specific instance of that and a specific problem, and then try to use it as a competitive advantage to launch their InsureTech company. And then there are tech vendors that are already in the insurance space. They're trying to adapt these technologies and provide them as a part of the solution to the carriers, right? That is what is happening. Now, we would like, as a roundtable, would like to hear from this group. Are you already using it in some form or other? Are you looking at things? Are you using case studies? So would like to hear, but in general, based on the way I understand, There are many people just dabbling, but I don't think there are any solid use cases at the across the industry level. Okay, but then I want to kind of set the stage again as where is it being used in the insurance? Like people talk about marketing and distribution. There's a lot of chatter in these areas, and I'm going to just quickly run through the slides, and then we can open up and we can discuss, like, marketing, distribution, enabling customer experience, underwriting and pricing, claims lifecycle, and loss control. And if you look at marketing distribution, how do you identify the right prospects and market segmentation? And, if there is a affinity for the people that you're targeting, and how do you reduce churn? Are you getting the right kind of customers in with a long lasting lifetime value? And also, there are people post a lot of data in the social media. There are a lot of raw data there. So using that, can you identify the right channels to reach out these people and come up with the right marketing campaigns? And by the way, all these things are effectively used in other industries. And coming to specifically to insurance, like, how do we kind of capture the risk appetite, especially for commercial insurers? And, how do we go after certain customers? And then also the use of virtual sales agents to kind of, take care of the things and, address the needs of the prospects coming in. So that is on the marketing distribution side. Then if you go into the customer experience, this people have tried, and there are a lot of people are using it, things like chat bots. They use a lot of AI technology that's developed, but it is configured and as virtual assistants provide natural looking conversations and personal interactions with the customers. And they, on top of it, they can provide some sort of a recommendation engines and tailored advice on, like, some of the, hey, you want these coverages or these kind of limits and things like that. So those provide a better customer experience. And also you can provide on-demand insurance in certain applications. And there are some virtual assistants to help the internal people. When you are trying to talk to the customer, you quickly want some information. These assistants help you to kind of get you the information as you're speaking with the prospects or policyholders, so that you, at the end of the day, you can provide good experience. And the same way, when the customer experience also includes claims, and you want to use it for customer retention and understanding user emotions, sentiments. Yeah, so people talk about using AI in many, many different contexts, right? And in underwriting, submission intake, like, if you look at it, people say 80% of the data is unstructured. And so how do you get the data, the meaningful information out of this unstructured data and provide in a contextual sense so that you can use it effectively in your underwriting? And likewise, leverage the third-party data to kind of analyze the risk, and also identify things like rate evasion, undisclosed drivers, or misrepresentation of business operations and those type of things. And likewise, spot fraud trends. And similarly, the automated underwriting, we talked about it, like, how do you do straight through processing, increase the percentage to very high levels, and reject things that you don't want, and then classify other things into, hey, we need a low touch review, a normal review, or a very detailed review, so that you don't spend cycles going after things that are kind of low probability. And the same way, you can also use better pricing models and usage-based insurance. So when you move towards the usage-based insurance, you're trying to use the source data instead of proxy info. Like, for example, data linked to specific individuals rather than pulling them into risk groups and use that in your underwriting. And these also help actuaries come up with better models quicker so that you can do faster rate filings. A couple of more slides and we can get into the discussion. And in the claims lifecycle, again, it's analogous to underwriting. Here, how do you collect pertinent info and you can settle the claims quickly, but at the same time, if you kind of too fast in settling the claims, you might not be looking for potential fraud. So this fraud detection is quite a bit talked about in the insurance industry in terms of using the AI. How do you kind of get that at the right time so that you can kind of, again, classify these things as, hey, no touch, let's settle it with virtual claims adjusters, or it's a low touch claim, or we really need to look into this. So, and the same way, you can automatically assess the severity and extent of the loss. And there are third-party services, like, you send a picture of a car in an accident, they can tell you extent of the damage and, repair estimates and things like that they could use. And similarly, if you have, I've listened to a couple of presentations where they have done a fantastic job, in cat losses. You can kind of fly a drone and you can look at the extent and severity of the claims and automatically figure out your reserves that you need to put in and how it is going to go and all those things. And people are also using a lot of sensors and AI in loss control, like it's proactive loss prevention, sensors to detect, like, for example, equipment breakdown, hotspot on electrical panels, and water leak. I mean, in the sense where they're using AI is, you have those sensors, and those sensors use the AI technologies to kind of say, hey, this is really something bad happening here. So we want to alert either a customer or the insurance company so that we can take any proactive measures and things like that. Anyway, so at this point, I want to kind of bring up a couple other points. When you want to use AI, you need lots of data. The disadvantage the smaller carriers have, unlike the large ones, we have limited amount of data. So how do you then, without a lot of data, you cannot set up the AIs and the models and things like that. So maybe until that time, you may need to rely on the rules and expert models, and over a period of time, they can feed into and train the AI and move slowly towards the AI-focused solutions. And likewise, the models can be available from third parties that you could leverage. You don't have to have all the data internally. And also, if you don't act on it, you may be getting into that adverse selection. And then there are other issues like discrimination, regulatory issues. How do you explain a particular decision and things like that? And so, if in summary, I think there are a lot of chatter, a lot of things, discussion happening, but at least I'm not seeing a lot of active implementations, especially in a broad range of carriers. But I would like to hear from the others as the round table. What do they think, what their experience and things like that? And then there are things like people talk about morality scores, deep fakes, and all kinds of interesting things. Anyway, that's for later. Anyway, I'll stop here, then we'll get into the discussion.
Yeah, so if anybody has any comments or questions, you can put them right into the Q&A. I can say, Bala, the amount of data, I've run into that myself, just, because of the type of risks. We're kind of a, higher average premium, but lower volume. And when I look at fraud analysis, that's one area where you're really, in claims and trying to detect fraud. I think it's important to augment your data where you can and it makes sense with other data and public data that's out there in order to get the volume that you really need. So I think that's a key point for some of the smaller to mid-sized carriers. Frank Giardina has a comment. We're starting to embed some machine learning for agency, premium, and claims modeling and prediction into his software. For anyone wanting to learn, the Google COBOL website is a free platform, with samples and an environment ready to develop machine learning models. He highly recommends it. So it's the Google Colab.
Yes.
I just wanted to make a note too, these questions and the comments that are coming in are being captured. So anything that's not answered or any of these commentary will get back out to everyone, script, and we'll answer some of the unanswered questions as well. That's a good point, Frank. Thank you. Randy has a question. Have you seen people trying to put AI models together and try to generate hints on suggestive tactics to improve the net combined ratio?
Me personally, I haven't kind of come across that scenario, but I think probably we can, so that's something we can look into, yes.
Yeah, lots of great stuff. Okay. It looks like that's about the rest of the questions, answers, and comments. So I think we're going to try to wrap up here and commit to our timing for your lunch break. So the lunch break is 11:45 to 1. As soon as we come back, we're going to get into the public cloud conversation. It's going to be a good discussion, why carriers should welcome the shift and how you can prepare. You will leave the Zoom meeting that you have right now, and you should have received a link for the session for the afternoon, because we did have 2 distinct sessions set up. I have one point here is use the link for the afternoon session if you did not receive it. We're going to contact Brittany at PAMIC, so get your pen. I'm going to write down her email address, bmyLnek@pamic.org. bmlynek@pamic.org. If you have any issues at all, just contact her. She's on alert and doing a great job here so far with this virtual conference. So thank you again, and we welcome back for the afternoon. I hope you have a great break.